The coffee exploded across his chest like a declaration of war. Sienna Cross stood frozen in the marble lobby of Moretti Tower, staring at the most dangerous man in New York City, dripping with espresso and her career simultaneously combusting in real time. Lucienne Moretti didn't blink, didn't move, just watched her with eyes cold enough to stop hearts. Around them, bodyguards reached for weapons. Then Sienna heard herself say, "At least it matches the outfit. Very luxury villain." The entire room stopped breathing. If you want to see how a joke almost became a murder and somehow turned into something far more dangerous, stay until the end. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Vahmet. The storm arrived 3 hours before Sienna's life fell apart. She'd noticed it through the taxi window on her way to Moretti Tower. Dark clouds gathering over Manhattan like a bruise spreading across the sky. Rain hammered the streets. Lightning cracked between skyscrapers, the kind of weather that made smart people stay home. Sienna wasn't smart. She was desperate. 26 years old, 3 months behind on rent, student loans piling up like corpses, and her last job had ended when her boss decided sexual harassment was a management strategy. She'd walked out with nothing but dignity and empty pockets. So when a recruiter called about an executive assistant position at a private investment firm offering triple her previous salary, Sienna didn't ask questions. She should have. Because everyone in New York knew what Moretti Enterprises really was. The Moretti family had ruled the city's underworld for 3 generations. They didn't just own nightclubs and shipping ports. They owned judges, politicians, entire neighborhoods. Fear itself had their fingerprints all over it. But Sienna told herself the same lie desperate people always tell. I'll just work there long enough to get back on my feet. Stay invisible, keep my head down, get out clean. 3 lies for the price of 1. The taxi dropped her at the base of Moretti Tower. 60 stories of black glass and steel stabbing into the storm clouds like a threat. Security cameras tracked her from every angle. Men in expensive suits and dead eyes watched from the shadows. Sienna clutched her cheap umbrella and walked through the revolving doors into a lobby that looked like it cost more than her entire neighborhood. Marble floors polished to mirrors, gold fixtures, a reception desk carved from a single piece of obsidian. Everything screamed power and money and consequences. Behind the desk sat a woman who looked like she'd been carved from ice and disappointment. "Name," the receptionist said without looking up. "Sienna Cross. I'm starting today as 47th floor, Mr. Moretti's executive suite. Don't be late." The woman's tone said, "You're already late. You're already failing. You're already gone." Sienna rode the elevator alone, watching the numbers climb while her reflection stared back from the polished walls. She looked exactly like what she was, broke, scared, wearing a suit she'd bought at a discount store and shoes that pinched her feet. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway that felt more like a museum than an office. Original paintings on the walls, sculptures that probably cost 6 figures, thick carpets that swallowed sound. Everything whispered, "You don't belong here," in a language Sienna's bank account understood perfectly. A man in a charcoal suit materialized beside her like a ghost. Miss Cross. He was tall, early 40s, with the kind of face that had seen terrible things and done worse. A thin scar ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline. "I'm Vincent Caruso, head of security. Mr. Moretti's expecting you." "I thought I was working for his—" "You work for Mr. Moretti," Vincent cut in quietly. "Everyone here works for Mr. Moretti. Remember that." He led her through a maze of corridors where people moved like shadows. Quiet, efficient, terrified. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody smiled. The entire floor hummed with suppressed tension. They stopped outside massive double doors made of dark wood that looked older than the building itself. "Wait here," Vincent said. "Someone will brief you." Then he vanished. Sienna stood alone in the hallway, suddenly aware of how loud her breathing sounded. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Sweat gathered at the small of her back despite the aggressive air conditioning. This was a mistake. This was a massive, life-destroying mistake. But walking away meant going back to nothing. At least here she had a chance, even if that chance came wrapped in expensive suits and criminal empire. The doors opened and a woman emerged. Mid-30s, designer dress, perfect hair, eyes that calculated Sienna's net worth and life expectancy in 3 seconds. "You must be the new assistant." Her tone suggested Sienna was the latest new assistant. "I'm Margaret Chen, Mr. Moretti's chief operations manager. Follow me." Margaret moved like a shark through the corridors, speaking without looking back. "You'll handle correspondence, schedule management, document preparation, and anything else Mr. Moretti requires. He expects perfection. He does not tolerate excuses, delays, or mistakes. Your predecessor lasted 6 days before she quit. The one before that made it 3. What happened to them?" Margaret stopped so suddenly Sienna almost crashed into her. They couldn't handle the pressure. She turned and her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Can you?" Before Sienna could answer, Margaret thrust a tablet into her hands. "Mr. Moretti has a standing meeting at 9. He takes his coffee black, no sugar, temperature between 160 and 170 degrees. Get 2. 1 for him, 1 for his associate. The cafe is on the ground floor. You have 8 minutes. Then she disappeared into an office, leaving Sienna alone with impossible instructions and a ticking clock. 160 to 170 degrees. Black. No sugar. 8 minutes. Sienna ran. She sprinted back through the corridors, jabbed the elevator button like it owed her money, and rode down 47 floors while mentally calculating whether she could actually pull this off. The ground floor cafe was tucked behind the main lobby. All exposed brick and artisan bullshit designed to make you forget you were buying coffee in a building owned by organized crime. 2 black coffees, Sienna gasped at the barista, between 160 and 170 degrees. The barista stared at her like she'd just asked for the moon in a cup. "We don't measure temperature." "Please," Sienna interrupted. "My entire life depends on this coffee being the correct temperature." Something in her voice must have registered as genuine desperation because the barista nodded and got to work. 4 minutes later, Sienna had 2 cups and 0 confidence. She rushed back toward the elevators, weaving between employees who moved aside like she was radioactive. The marble floor gleamed under the lobby's harsh lights. Rain hammered the windows. Thunder rolled through the building's steel bones. Sienna was 3 steps from the elevator when her cheap shoe caught on absolutely nothing. Time stretched. The cups flew from her hands in a spray of scalding black coffee that arced through the air like a curse with her name on it. And standing directly in its path was a man who made the storm outside look gentle. Lucien Moretti. Sienna knew his face from news articles and whispered warnings. He was younger than she expected, maybe 35, but he wore power like most men wore cologne. Tailored black suit that probably cost more than a car. Silver watch that could have paid her rent for a year. Dark hair swept back from a face carved from ice and violence. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Cold, calculating. The kind of eyes that had watched men beg and die and felt nothing. And now those eyes watched coffee explode across his chest in slow motion. The impact was almost beautiful. Dark liquid spreading across expensive fabric, dripping down his silk tie, pooling in the folds of his jacket. The entire lobby froze. Guards reached for weapons. Employees backed away like Sienna had just triggered a bomb. Even the rain outside seemed to pause in anticipation. Lucien Moretti stood perfectly still, coffee dripping from his suit, his expression unreadable as carved stone. Sienna's mind went blank with panic. Say something. Apologize. Beg. Run. Instead, her mouth opened and pure terror came out disguised as sarcasm. At least it matches the outfit. Very luxury villain. The words hung in the air like suicide notes. Vincent materialized beside Lucien, one hand inside his jacket where everyone knew the gun lived. Other guards closed in, forming a wall of muscle and barely contained violence. Lucien raised one hand. Everyone stopped moving. He looked down at his ruined suit, then up at Sienna, then back at the coffee soaking through thousands of dollars worth of Italian tailoring. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, more terrifying than shouting. "What's your name?" "Sienna Cross." Her voice shook. "I'm your new... I know who you are." He stepped closer. Coffee dripped from his tie onto the marble. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes." "Then you understand how serious a mistake you just made." It wasn't a question. Sienna's hands trembled, her pulse hammered in her ears. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs had turned to concrete. I'm sorry, she managed. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, or the suit, or your funeral expenses after you kill me. Whatever seems fair. Someone in the crowd made a sound that might have been a strangled laugh before choking it off. Lucian studied her with an intensity that felt like a physical weight, like he was reading every secret she'd ever kept, every lie she'd ever told, every desperate choice that had brought her to this moment. You think this is funny? He asked softly. No. Sienna's voice cracked. I think I just destroyed my career and possibly my life before 9 in the morning, which has to be some kind of record. Another beat of terrible silence. Then Lucian did something nobody expected. He smiled. Not a warm smile. Not friendly. But there was something almost amused in the curve of his mouth, like he'd just witnessed something rare and unexpected in a world that rarely surprised him anymore. Vincent, Lucian said without looking away from Sienna. Take her upstairs, get her cleaned up, then bring her to my office. Vincent stepped forward. Sir, perhaps... Now! The single word carried enough weight to crush buildings. Vincent grabbed Sienna's arm and pulled her toward the elevators while the crowd dispersed like smoke. She stumbled along in a daze, her mind spinning. He didn't kill me. He didn't fire me. He smiled. What the hell just happened? The elevator doors closed and Vincent finally released her arm. You, he said quietly, are either the luckiest person I've ever met or the dumbest. Possibly both. What happens now? Vincent's expression suggested the answer was nothing good. Now you meet with Mr. Moretti, in his office, alone. And Miss Cross? He looked at her with something that might have been pity. Whatever you do, don't make him laugh again. Last person who did that ended up in the Hudson River. The elevator climbed toward the 47th floor, while Sienna's stomach dropped toward the basement. Lucian's office was less an office and more a throne room overlooking Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the storm-dark city like a painting of power and conquest. A desk made from a single piece of black walnut dominated the space. No computer, no clutter, just a phone that probably connected directly to Hell's customer service line. Lucian stood at the windows with his back to her, holding a fresh cup of coffee. He'd changed into a new suit identical to the one she'd destroyed. The ruined one was nowhere to be seen, probably already burned or buried or whatever crime lords did with coffee-stained evidence. Sit, he said without turning around. Sienna sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than her car. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, so she pressed them flat against her thighs. Tell me something, Lucian said. When you applied for this position, did you research the company? Yes. And what did you learn? That you're a private investment firm. The lie tasted like acid. Lucian turned to face her, and his expression was somewhere between amused and dangerous. Try again. Sienna's throat went dry. That you're connected. Connected, he repeated. That's a polite way of saying you know exactly what I am and you came anyway. He crossed to his desk, set down the coffee, and leaned against the edge. Why? I need the job. You need money. There are easier ways to earn it that don't involve working for the Moretti family. None that pay what you're offering. Desperation, then. He studied her like she was a puzzle with missing pieces. Or stupidity. I haven't decided which. Maybe both, Sienna said before she could stop herself. That almost smile flickered across his face again. Most people who spill coffee on me end up begging for their lives, Lucian said conversationally. You made a joke. Either you're brave or you've got a death wish disguised as sarcasm. I'm terrified, Sienna admitted. But I'm also tired of being scared all the time. Scared I can't pay rent. Scared I'll end up homeless. Scared I'll die broke and alone with nothing to show for it. So when you walked toward me looking like you might kill me, I thought, at least it would be interesting. The words hung between them like a confession. Lucien picked up his coffee, took a slow sip, then set it down precisely in the center of a leather coaster. You're not what I expected, he said finally. That good or bad? I haven't decided that either. He pushed off the desk and moved to the windows again, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the storm. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to work for me. Not as an assistant. I have enough people fetching coffee and managing schedules. You're going to be my problem solver. Sienna blinked. I don't understand. This organization has a lot of moving parts. Business ventures, investments, personnel issues, things fall through cracks. Problems get ignored until they become disasters. I need someone smart enough to spot those problems early and brave enough to tell me the truth when everyone else is too scared. He glanced back at her. You just proved you can do both. By ruining your suit? By not pretending it didn't happen? By making a joke instead of lying or running? By sitting in that chair right now even though you're terrified? Lucian turned fully to face her. Most people I employ fear me so much they become useless. They tell me what I want to hear instead of what I need to know. But you, he tilted his head slightly. You're scared, but you're not paralyzed by it. That's rare. Sienna's mind raced. This wasn't how she thought this conversation would go. She'd expected to be fired, or worse. What kind of problems? She asked carefully. The kind that don't get solved with bullets or bribes? The kind that require someone who can think instead of just following orders? He picked up a folder from his desk and tossed it to her. Start with that. Sienna caught it awkwardly and flipped it open. Inside were financial reports from various Moretti businesses, restaurants, shipping companies, construction firms. All legitimate on paper, probably less legitimate in practice. Those are employee satisfaction surveys, Lucien said. Complaints, concerns, the kind of thing my managers usually ignore because they're too busy making money to care if the people under them are suffering. Sienna scanned the pages. Low pay. No benefits. 16-hour shifts. Managers skimming wages. It was a horror show of labor violations wrapped in corporate letterhead. You want me to, what? Fix this? I want you to tell me what's broken, then we'll discuss how to fix it. Lucian's expression was unreadable. I built this empire on loyalty, but loyalty doesn't last when you treat people like disposable machinery. Someone forgot that. I need you to remind them. It was possibly the strangest job description Sienna had ever heard. And if your managers don't like me poking around their operations, then they'll learn to deal with it. His voice dropped into something darker. You report to me, not them, not anyone else. If someone gives you trouble, you tell me. I'll handle it. The unspoken threat hung in the air like smoke. Sienna looked down at the folder again. This was insane. She'd walked into this building expecting to file paperwork and answer phones. Now she was being handed institutional problems in a criminal organization and told to solve them. But something about it felt right in a way nothing else had in months. Maybe years. Okay, she said quietly. Lucian raised an eyebrow. Just like that? You're paying me more than I've ever made to point out when people are being terrible. Honestly, that sounds like the job I was born for. That almost smile appeared again, lasting a full second this time before disappearing behind his usual mask of controlled power. Vincent will set you up with an office and system access. You start tomorrow. Lucian moved back to his desk and sat down, picking up a phone. And Miss Cross? Yes? His eyes locked onto hers. Dark, intense, impossible to read. Next time you bring me coffee, try not to wear it. Eek. Sienna spent the rest of the day in a daze. Vincent gave her a quick tour. Offices, conference rooms, the executive dining room where the city's most dangerous people ate catered lunches and discussed crimes over tiramisu. Her new office was actually a small conference room on the 46th floor with a desk, computer, and a view of the building across the street. She logged into the system Vincent set up and started digging through files. The deeper she went, the uglier it got. Drivers working for Moretti Transport hadn't received a pay increase in 3 years, despite company profits doubling. Security teams at the family's nightclubs were pulling double shifts without overtime. Kitchen staff at Moretti-owned restaurants were reporting injuries from broken equipment that never got fixed. And the complaints went nowhere. Middle managers buried them, deleted them, threatened employees who pushed back. Sienna made notes, built spreadsheets, cross-referenced complaints with profit reports. The pattern was obvious. The organization made money by squeezing every drop of productivity from the people at the bottom, while the people at the top hoarded the rewards. It was capitalism at its worst, dressed in expensive suits and mob connections. By 6 p.m., her eyes burned and her head throbbed. She gathered her things and headed for the elevator, desperate to get home, take a shower, and process the fact that her life had become completely unrecognizable in the span of 8 hours. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor just as Lucian walked past. He stopped. So did Sienna. They stared at each other for a beat too long. "Long first day?" he asked. "Is that your way of asking if I quit yet?" "I'm asking if you found anything interesting." Sienna hesitated. Every instinct said, "Be careful, don't overstep, remember who you're talking to." But he'd hired her to tell the truth. "Your managers are robbing you blind," she said. "Not money, loyalty. They're treating your people like garbage, and eventually that's going to cost you more than any business loss ever could." Lucien's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Interest, or maybe calculation. "Tomorrow," he said. "My office. 8 a.m. Bring proof." Then he walked away, bodyguards materializing around him like shadows come to life. Sienna stood alone in the lobby, rain still hammering the windows, thunder rolling through the city's steel bones. She'd just accused a mafia boss's organization of systemic abuse, and he told her to bring receipts. This is either going to be the best decision I ever made, or the last one. She walked out into the storm, pulled her cheap coat tight, and disappeared into the Manhattan night, while lightning split the sky above Moretti Tower. The next morning started with a text from an unknown number. Conference Room 3, 7:45 a.m. Bring your research. LM Sienna arrived at 7:40 with a laptop full of evidence and a stomach full of dread. Conference Room 3 was smaller than she expected. Oval table, leather chairs, windows overlooking the awakening city. Lucian was already there, seated at the head of the table with coffee and a tablet. He looked up when she entered. "Show me," he said without preamble. Sienna set up her laptop and launched the presentation she'd built the night before. Spreadsheets, complaint logs, comparative analysis showing the gap between profits and wages. She walked him through it systematically, trying to keep her voice steady while Lucien watched with an intensity that felt like standing under a microscope. When she finished, silence filled the room. Lucien leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. "You put this together in one afternoon," he said finally. "It wasn't hard. The data's all there. Your system just—" She searched for diplomatic phrasing. Nobody was connecting the dots. Nobody was looking. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "Because I told them to focus on profits and assume everything else would take care of itself." "That's not entirely your fault." "It's exactly my fault," Lucien interrupted. "I built this organization. I chose these managers. I created the environment where this happens." He stood abruptly and walked to the windows. "My father used to say fear keeps people loyal. Turns out fear just keeps them quiet." Sienna didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. After a long moment, Lucien turned back to her. "I want you to interview the employees, not officially. No paperwork. Just talk to them. Find out what they need, what would make them feel valued instead of expendable. Then bring me solutions, not just problems. Your managers aren't going to like that." "I don't particularly care what my managers like." His expression was granite. "They work for me, not the other way around. And if they have a problem with you doing your job, they can discuss it with me personally." The threat was clear. Sienna nodded slowly. "When do I start?" "Today. Vincent will set up interviews." Lucien moved toward the door, then paused. "And Miss Cross? Don't soften the truth because you think it'll upset me. I need to know how bad this is." "Even if it's really bad?" He met her eyes, and for just a second she saw something beneath the ice, something almost human. "Especially if it's really bad." Then he was gone, leaving Sienna alone with a laptop full of evidence and a job that had just become exponentially more dangerous. Because she wasn't just working for the Moretti family anymore. She was working against the people who ran it. The interviews started that afternoon. Vincent escorted her to a small office in the basement where employees filtered in one at a time, nervous and suspicious. A driver named Marcus told her about working 70-hour weeks with no overtime and a manager who threatened to fire anyone who complained. A security guard named Elena described pulling triple shifts while recovering from a broken arm because the company refused to pay for temporary replacements. A restaurant cook named David whispered about kitchen equipment held together with duct tape and prayers while the manager drove a brand new Mercedes. Every story was the same. People ground down by a system that valued profit over humanity, scared to speak up because they'd seen what happened to people who did. By the end of the day, Sienna had 20 interviews and a rage burning in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. She compiled everything into a report and brought it to Lucian's office at 6 p.m. He read it in silence while she stood by the windows watching the city lights flicker on like stars coming alive. When he finished, he set the report down carefully. "How many of our businesses are like this?" he asked. "Most of them. The ones I've checked so far, anyway." His jaw tightened. "And the managers?" "Making money hand over fist while the people doing the actual work barely survive." Lucian stood and moved to the bar cart in the corner. He poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a crystal glass, drank it in one swallow, then poured another. "My father built this empire on fear," he said quietly. "When people feared him, they obeyed. When they obeyed, we prospered. I inherited that philosophy like I inherited everything else." He turned to face her. "But fear doesn't build loyalty. It builds resentment, and resentment eventually becomes betrayal. So what do you want to do about it?" Lucian was quiet for a long moment. "I want to fix it," he said finally. "All of it. Starting with the worst offenders." He set down the glass. "Give me names, the managers who are the biggest problems. We'll start there." Sienna pulled up a list on her laptop. "Anthony Ricci at Moretti Transport, Maria Santos at the restaurant group, Victor Chen at the nightclub security division. They're the worst." "Okay." Lucien's voice had gone cold, calculated. "Set up a meeting with all 3, tomorrow morning. Tell them it's mandatory." "And then what?" He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who just decided someone's fate. "Then I remind them who they work for." Gates. The meeting happened at 9 a.m. in the largest conference room, the one usually reserved for major business decisions and territorial negotiations. Anthony, Maria, and Victor arrived looking confident, annoyed, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Lucien sat at the head of the table with Sienna beside him. Vincent stood by the door like a promise of violence. "Thank you for coming," Lucien said pleasantly. "I wanted to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention." Anthony leaned back in his chair. "If this is about the quarterly numbers, it's not." Lucian's tone shifted into something sharp. "It's about how you treat the people working for you." Silence. Maria recovered first. "Sir, I'm not sure what you've heard, but I've heard the drivers at Transport haven't had a raise in 3 years, despite the division doubling profits." Lucian interrupted. "I've heard that restaurant staff are working with broken equipment while you drive a car worth more than their annual salaries combined. I've heard that security teams are pulling triple shifts and reporting injuries at rates that would make OSHA shut us down if we were legitimate." Victor's face had gone pale. "Who told you this?" "Does it matter?" Lucian's voice dropped into something dangerous. "Is any of it untrue?" None of them answered. "That's what I thought." Lucian stood, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your divisions and fix this immediately. Raise wages, hire enough staff so nobody's working themselves to death, replace broken equipment, implement actual safety protocols. And you're going to do it with your bonuses." Anthony's confidence cracked. "Our bonuses? You've been hoarding profits while the people who actually generate those profits suffer. So yes, your bonuses, all of them, retroactive to the beginning of this fiscal year, that money goes back to your employees." "That's," Maria started. "Not negotiable," Lucien finished. "You work for me. I just gave you an order. The only acceptable response is yes, sir." A beat of stunned silence. Then Anthony made a mistake. "With all due respect, sir, this is going to cost us—" Lucien moved so fast Sienna barely saw it. 1 second he was standing at the head of the table. The next he was in front of Anthony with his hand wrapped around the man's throat, slamming him back against the leather chair. Vincent didn't move. Neither did Sienna, though her heart tried to punch through her rib cage. "Let me be very clear," Lucien said quietly, his face inches from Anthony's. "This organization exists because people are willing to die for it, not because I pay them, not because I threaten them, because they believe in something larger than themselves. But belief dies when you treat them like disposable garbage. So you're going to fix this. Or I'm going to find someone who will. Do you understand?" Anthony nodded frantically, his face turning purple. Lucien released him and stepped back, straightening his cuffs like nothing had happened. "Get out," he said calmly. "All of you. And if I hear one more complaint about any of your divisions, we'll have this conversation again. Except next time, it won't be in a conference room." The three managers scrambled out like rats fleeing a sinking ship. When the door closed, Sienna finally let out the breath she'd been holding. That was... She searched for words. Intense. Lucien returned to his seat and picked up his coffee like he hadn't just threatened murder over employee benefits. "They needed to understand the stakes," he said simply. "And if they don't fix it? Then Vincent handles it." He glanced at his head of security. "Won't you?" Vincent's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "With pleasure, sir." Sienna realized with a jolt that she'd just witnessed something most people never saw, the moment when a criminal empire decided to evolve or die, and she was standing in the middle of it. In time, word spread through the organization like wildfire. By the end of the week, drivers at transport received raises and overtime pay. Restaurant equipment got replaced. Security staffing doubled. Managers who'd been untouchable for years suddenly found themselves accountable, and everyone knew why. Because Lucien Moretti's new problem solver had pointed out the rot, and the boss had decided to cut it out. Sienna became both a hero and a target. Lower-level employees approached her in hallways, thanking her quietly, telling her stories of lives genuinely improving for the first time in years. But managers looked at her with barely concealed hatred. She'd cost them money, power, the ability to exploit people without consequences, and in an organization built on violence that made her dangerous. One night, working late, Sienna returned to her office to find a note on her desk. "Stay in your lane or learn to swim." A friend. Her hands shook as she picked up the paper. It wasn't signed, didn't need to be. The threat was clear enough. She should have been terrified, should have walked straight to Lucien's office and demanded protection. Instead, she crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. Because somewhere between spilling coffee and dismantling systemic abuse, Sienna Cross had stopped being scared. She'd started being angry. And anger, she was learning, was so much more useful than fear. 2 weeks into her new role, Lucien called her into his office at midnight. She found him standing at the windows, drink in hand, tie loosened, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Rarely do." He didn't turn around. "I've been reading your latest reports, the improvements, response rates, satisfaction scores." "It's working," Sienna said. "People feel heard, valued. They're working harder because they actually care now." "Yes." He took a slow sip of whiskey. "My father would have hated it. He believed generosity was weakness. That loyalty had to be beaten into people like a lesson they'd never forget." "What do you believe?" Lucien finally turned to face her, and his expression was complicated, tired, conflicted, almost vulnerable. "I believe I've been doing things his way for so long I forgot there might be another option." He set down his glass. "You're changing this organization, Miss Cross. Changing it in ways that terrify my old guard and threaten everything they've built their power on. They're not going to forgive that." "I know." "And it doesn't scare you?" Sienna thought about the note, the glares, the whispered threats. "It scares me," she admitted, "but not enough to stop." Something shifted in Lucien's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Because, for the first time in my life, I'm doing something that actually matters. I'm not just surviving, I'm making things better for people who deserve better." She met his eyes. "You gave me that chance when you could have just had me killed for ruining your suit. I'm not wasting it." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Then Lucien moved closer, not threatening, just present. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," he said softly. "Is that good or bad?" "I still haven't decided," but his expression suggested he was leaning toward one answer more than the other. Sienna's breath caught. They were standing too close, the space between them charged with something dangerous and undefined. Before either of them could move, Lucien's phone rang. The moment shattered. He answered on the second ring, his expression shifting instantly back to stone. What is it? A pause. Then his voice went cold. When? Another pause. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at Sienna. There's been an incident at one of our warehouses. Someone set fire to a shipment worth $3 million. Security footage shows it was deliberate. Inside job? That's what I'm about to find out. He grabbed his jacket. Go home, Miss Cross. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. But as Sienna headed for the elevator, something twisted in her gut. Because she'd learned enough about the Moretti organization to know one thing. Nothing was ever an accident, and everything was connected, including her. The warehouse was still burning when Lucien arrived. Orange flames licked the night sky like hungry tongues, turning the industrial district into something biblical. Black smoke poured from shattered windows. Fire trucks screamed through the streets. The air tasted like chemicals and destruction. Sienna watched from her apartment window 3 miles away as the glow painted her ceiling in shades of catastrophe. She'd ignored Lucien's order to go home. Instead, she'd followed the sirens, parked 2 blocks away, and climbed the fire escape to watch the empire burn from a safe distance. Her phone buzzed. Go home. Now. This isn't safe. LM. She typed back, neither is working for you. Still here. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, stubborn. Sienna smiled despite everything and climbed back down into the night. She found Lucien standing in the warehouse parking lot, surrounded by Vincent and a dozen armed men who looked ready to start a war. Fire crews worked behind police barricades while investigators picked through debris. Lucien's face was stone-carved from rage. $3 million, Vincent was saying, plus the building, plus the contracts we can't fulfill now. Someone just cost us $10 million in losses and credibility. Who had access? Lucien's voice was quiet, deadly. 14 people, all vetted, all loyal. Apparently not all of them. Sienna approached slowly, staying in the shadows until Vincent spotted her and tensed. Boss, he said quietly. Lucien turned and his expression shifted through surprise, annoyance, and something else she couldn't name. I told you to go home. You tell a lot of people a lot of things, Sienna said. Doesn't mean they listen. Despite everything, the corner of his mouth twitched. Then the moment passed and he was back to business. Vincent, get the security footage from the last 72 hours. I want every person who entered that building identified and brought in for questioning, no exceptions. Already on it. Lucien walked toward the barricade, studying the ruins like they might confess their secrets. Sienna followed. This wasn't random, she said quietly. No. Someone sending you a message. Yes. He didn't look at her. The question is who and why now? Sienna thought about the note on her desk. The threats. The managers she'd humiliated. The power structure she'd disrupted. What if it's internal, she asked. Not a rival family. Someone inside the organization who's unhappy with the changes. Lucien's jaw tightened. Then they just made the last mistake of their life. A police detective approached, middle-aged, tired eyes, the look of someone who'd been on the Moretti payroll long enough to know when to ask questions and when to shut up. Mr. Moretti, preliminary findings suggest accelerant was used. Multiple ignition points, definitely arson. Suspects? Working on it. Security footage is corrupted. Cameras went down an hour before the fire started. Lucien and Vincent exchanged a look that said everything. This was professional, planned, inside work. The detective cleared his throat. If you think of anyone who might have motive, I'll let you know, Lucien interrupted. Thank you, detective. The dismissal was clear. When they were alone again, Lucien pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me. I need everyone in the conference room tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. No excuses. He paused. Yes, everyone, including the people who think they're too important to be questioned. He hung up and finally looked at Sienna. You should go home, really this time. Tomorrow's going to be ugly. How ugly? The kind where people confess to crimes or disappear trying to lie about them. Sienna swallowed hard. And you think I can't handle that? I think you weren't hired to watch interrogations. I was hired to solve problems. This seems like a problem. Lucien studied her for a long moment, and she could see him calculating, weighing, deciding how much trust to extend to the woman who'd spilled coffee on him 3 weeks ago. "Fine," he said finally. "But you stay quiet unless I ask you a direct question. And if things get violent, you leave. Understood?" "Understood." She was lying. He probably knew it, but he didn't call her out. They stood together watching the warehouse burn while sirens wailed and the city pretended not to notice another piece of the Moretti empire going up in smoke. Fuck. The conference room at 7 a.m. felt like a courtroom designed by nightmares. Every division head, every manager, every captain in the organization sat around the massive table, looking varying degrees of nervous and defiant. Anthony Ricci from transport, Maria Santos from the restaurants, Victor Chen from security, plus a dozen others Sienna had never met but recognized from file photos and whispered warnings. These were the people who actually ran the empire while Lucien made the big decisions. And one of them was a traitor. Lucien sat at the head of the table, perfectly calm, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. Vincent stood behind him like a promise. Sienna sat in the corner, notepad in hand, trying to look invisible. "Thank you all for coming," Lucien began, his voice conversational, almost friendly. "I'm sure you've heard about the warehouse fire. 10 million in losses, 3 million in product, contracts we can't fulfill, credibility damaged with our partners." No one spoke. Security footage was corrupted an hour before the fire started. Multiple ignition points, accelerant used, professional work. Lucian's tone didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. And it was done by someone with access. Nervous glances around the table. "So here's what's going to happen," Lucian continued. "You're all going to tell me where you were between midnight and 3 a.m. last night. You're going to provide alibis, phone records, credit card receipts, security footage from wherever you claim you were. And you're going to do it quickly and honestly because my patience for lies is approximately 0. Maria spoke first. "Sir, surely you don't think—" "I think someone in this room cost me $10 million, Lucien interrupted. "So yes, I think. Now start talking." One by one, they provided alibis. Maria was home with her husband and teenage daughter. Phone records and home security footage confirmed it. Victor was at his gym until midnight, then home. Receipts and camera footage backed him up. A shipping captain named Dominic was at a bar until 2 a.m. with 6 witnesses who would swear to it. Anthony Ricci was the problem. "I was home," he said. "Alone. My wife's visiting her sister in Boston." "Phone records?" Vincent asked. "I didn't make any calls." "Security footage?" "My building's cameras have been broken for weeks." Lucien leaned forward slightly. "So you have no alibi, no proof, just your word?" Anthony's face reddened. "I've worked for this family for 15 years. My loyalty doesn't mean shit if you can't prove where you were when my warehouse burned." Lucien's voice was ice. "Vincent, take Mr. Ricci downstairs. We'll continue this conversation privately." Anthony's eyes widened. "Boss, I swear I didn't—" "Downstairs. Now." Vincent grabbed Anthony's arm and hauled him out of his chair. The man went pale as Vincent dragged him toward the door. "Wait," Sienna heard herself say. Everyone turned to stare at her. Lucien's expression was unreadable. "Miss Cross?" Her mouth had gone dry, but she pushed forward. "Anthony's been working 70-hour weeks since the reform started. He's exhausted, angry, resentful, but that doesn't make him an arsonist." She looked directly at Lucien. "It makes him a suspect, but not the only one." "You have another theory?" Lucien's tone was dangerous. Sienna stood, legs shaking but voice steady. "The fire happened at a transport warehouse, but the security footage was corrupted by someone with technical access. That's not Anthony's skill set. He's operations, not tech." She turned to Victor Chen. "But you oversee all security systems, including warehouse cameras." Victor went very still. "Are you accusing me?" "I'm saying the pieces don't fit. Anthony has motive but not means. You have means but supposedly an alibi." Sienna's heart hammered, but she kept going. "Unless your gym footage was edited, or your timeline doesn't match as perfectly as you claim." The silence in the room was suffocating. Lucien's eyes moved between Anthony, Victor, and Sienna like a predator choosing targets. "Vincent," he said quietly, "take them both downstairs. I want phone records, security footage, financial statements, and anything else that might tell me who's lying. And Miss Cross?" He finally looked at her. You just made this exponentially more complicated. Or more accurate, she said, meeting his gaze. Something flickered in his expression, respect or fury, she couldn't tell. Vincent grabbed both men and escorted them out while the remaining managers sat frozen. Lucian stood. Meeting adjourned. Nobody leaves the city. Nobody talks to the press. Nobody does anything except wait for my call. Understood? Nods around the table. Get out! They scattered like cockroaches. When the room was empty except for Lucian and Sienna, he turned to face her. That was either incredibly smart or incredibly stupid. I'm starting to think those are the same thing in this job. Lucian moved closer, and she could see the exhaustion behind his controlled facade. If you're wrong and Anthony's innocent, I just traumatized a loyal employee because you played detective. And if I'm right, you were about to let the real traitor watch you torture the wrong man. True. He rubbed his face, suddenly looking more human than she'd ever seen him. This is why I don't trust people. They're complicated, messy. They lie even when telling the truth would save them. That's what makes them human. That's what makes them dangerous. Sienna wanted to argue, but her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. A text message with a photo attached. She opened it and her blood went cold. It was a picture of her apartment building, taken from street level. Recent. She could see her car parked out front. Below the image, smart girls know when to shut up. Her hands shook. Lucian noticed immediately. What is it? She showed him the phone. His expression went dark in a way that made the warehouse fire look gentle. When did you get this? Just now. Have you gotten threats before? Sienna thought about the note on her desk. She'd thrown it away, ignored it, pretended it didn't matter. Once. A note in my office 2 weeks ago. And you didn't tell me. I didn't want to seem weak. Lucian's jaw clenched. Weak would be ignoring a death threat. Smart is telling me immediately so I can eliminate the person dumb enough to threaten you. The possessiveness in his tone sent something hot through Sienna's chest. What do we do now? Now you're moving into a secure location until I find out who's behind this. He pulled out his phone. Vincent, I need a protective detail on Miss Cross, immediately, and get her belongings moved to the safe house on 5th. I don't need... Sienna started. Yes, you do. His voice cut through her protest. Someone just burned down my warehouse and threatened you within 12 hours. That's not coincidence, that's strategy. They're coming after me by targeting the people around me. Why would I be important enough to target? Lucian looked at her like she'd just asked why water was wet. Because you changed everything. You disrupted the power structure, made enemies of people who've been untouchable for years. And worse. He stopped himself. Worse what? Worse, they can see that I value you, which makes you leverage. The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was ready to examine. Before Sienna could respond, Vincent burst back into the room. Boss, we've got a problem. Another one? Anthony's phone records just came through. He made 3 calls the night of the fire, all to a burner phone we've traced to the Calabrese family. Lucian went very still. He's working with the Calabrese? Looks like it. The Calabrese family was the Moretti's oldest rival, a smaller operation but vicious, always looking for ways to chip away at Lucian's territory. And Victor? Lucian asked. Clean. His gym footage checks out. Timeline solid. He's got no connection to the fire. Lucien looked at Sienna. You were wrong. I was trying to be thorough. You almost got an innocent man tortured because you wanted to play detective. The words hit like a slap. Sienna felt her face flush. I was trying to help. You're not qualified to help with this. You track employee complaints and fix scheduling problems. You don't investigate arson and identify traitors. His voice was cold. Stay in your lane. The dismissal was brutal. Sienna grabbed her things and walked toward the door, anger and humiliation burning through her chest. She made it 3 steps before Lucian spoke again. Wait! She stopped but didn't turn around. You were trying to protect an innocent man, he said quietly. That instinct isn't wrong. The execution was. But the instinct matters. Sienna turned slowly. Lucien looked exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally, like something inside him was cracking under pressure he'd carried for too long. I'm going to deal with Anthony, he said. Vincent will take you to the safe house. Stay there. Don't leave. Don't take risks. Let me handle this. And if whoever sent that text comes after me anyway, then they'll discover what happens when someone threatens something He stopped abruptly. Someone important to my organization. The correction was clumsy, obvious, but neither of them acknowledged it. Be careful, Sienna said quietly. Always am. It was a lie, and they both knew it. The safe house was a penthouse apartment in Midtown with floor-to-ceiling windows, leather furniture, and enough security cameras to make paranoia look reasonable. Vincent posted 2 guards outside the door and 1 in the lobby. Don't open the door for anyone except me or the boss, he instructed. Food will be delivered by our people. If you need anything, call this number. He handed her a card. And Miss Cross, the boss doesn't bring people to safe houses lightly. Whatever you think is happening between you two, it's more serious than you realize. Then he left before she could ask what the hell that meant. Sienna stood in the middle of the empty apartment, her small bag of hastily packed belongings looking pathetic against the luxury surrounding her. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the threatening text again. Smart girls know when to shut up, but she'd never been particularly smart about knowing when to quit. She opened her laptop and started digging through files she'd been compiling. Employee records, financial discrepancies, communication logs. If someone was targeting her, they were doing it because she'd uncovered something they wanted buried. The question was what? Hours passed. Coffee went cold. The city lights outside shifted from afternoon sun to evening glow to midnight darkness. And then Sienna found it. Buried in Transport Division financial records was a pattern of off-book payments. Small amounts, spread across months, easy to miss unless you were looking. And they all traced back to accounts connected to the Calabrese family. Anthony hadn't just burned down the warehouse. He'd been selling information to the Moretti's biggest rival for months. Sienna grabbed her phone and called Lucian. He answered on the first ring. It's midnight. This better be... Anthony wasn't just an arsonist. He's been feeding intel to the Calabrese for months. Financial records, shipping schedules, security protocols. Everything they'd need to dismantle you piece by piece. Silence. Then, how do you know this? I've been going through Transport Division files. There's a pattern of payments he's been hiding in operational expenses. Small enough to avoid attention, but consistent enough to add up to serious money. Send me everything you have. Already done. Another beat of silence. You're supposed to be hiding, staying safe, not investigating financial crimes at midnight. I'm not good at hiding. I've noticed. His voice softened slightly. Thank you. This helps. Where are you? Somewhere you don't need to know about. Handling Anthony. Translation. Torturing a traitor until he confessed everything. Sienna's stomach turned, but she didn't let it show in her voice. Be careful. You too. And Sienna? He paused. Lock the doors. Keep the guards close. If anything feels wrong, call Vincent immediately. I will. She hung up and sat in the dark penthouse, staring at spreadsheets full of betrayal and wondering how her life had become this unrecognizable in less than a month. A knock on the door made her jump. Miss Cross? A muffled voice from the hallway. Food delivery. She moved to the door and checked the peephole. A young guy in his 20s holding a bag from an expensive Italian place. He wore the uniform. Looked harmless. But Vincent had said food would come from our people. This guy looked nervous, too nervous. Sienna's instinct screamed wrong. She backed away from the door slowly. The knock came again. Harder. Miss Cross, your food's getting cold. She didn't answer. Silence. Then the sound of metal scraping metal. Lockpicks. Someone was breaking in. Sienna grabbed her phone and dialed Vincent while running toward the bedroom. Safe house. Someone's breaking in, not your people. Get to the panic room, behind the closet in the master bedroom. Code is 7739. I'm 2 minutes out. Sienna sprinted to the bedroom, threw open the closet, and found the hidden panel Vincent had mentioned. She punched in the code with shaking hands. The panel clicked open. Behind her, the apartment door crashed inward. Footsteps. Multiple people. Moving fast. Sienna dove into the panic room and slammed the steel door shut just as someone grabbed for her ankle. She heard them pounding on the other side. Shouting. Something that sounded like gunfire. Then silence. Sienna sat in the dark, heart hammering, phone pressed to her ear. Vincent? Stay where you are. We're clearing the apartment. More gunfire, shouting, the sound of bodies hitting the floor, then Vincent's voice through the panic room door. Miss Cross, it's me. You can come out. She opened the door slowly. The apartment was a war zone. 3 bodies on the floor, guards everywhere, blood on the expensive carpet. Vincent stood in the middle of it, looking like violence was just another Tuesday. They came for you, he said simply. Calabrese family, trying to take you as leverage against the boss. Sienna's legs went weak. Are they dead? Yes. We don't take prisoners when it comes to kidnapping attempts. Before Sienna could process that, her phone rang. Lucien. She answered with shaking hands. Are you hurt? His voice was sharp, controlled, terrified underneath. No, Vincent got here in time. Thank Christ. A long exhale. This is my fault. I should have anticipated they'd come after you directly. How could you have known? Because it's what I would do. His voice turned dark. Anthony gave them everything. Locations, schedules, weaknesses, including you. What did you do to him? What needed to be done? No emotion, just fact. He won't be a problem anymore. Neither will his Calabrese contacts. I'm handling that now. Translation. People were dying tonight because of her. Sienna sat down on the couch, ignoring the blood soaking into the carpet nearby. This isn't sustainable, she said quietly. They're escalating. The warehouse, the threats, tonight. They're trying to destroy you by destroying everything around you. I know. So what do we do? Silence. Then Lucien's voice, quiet and dangerous. We go to war. The war room beneath Moretti Tower looked exactly like its name suggested. Conference table covered in maps, surveillance photos, financial records, and enough evidence of crimes to fill a federal prosecutor's dreams. Lucien stood at the head surrounded by his most trusted people. Vincent. Marco, the enforcer. Sophia, who ran intelligence. And Sienna, who had somehow become essential to strategies that should have terrified her. The Calabrese family has been bleeding us for months, Lucien was saying. Small cuts, strategic. Anthony was their inside man, but he wasn't the only one. They've got people in our shipping operations, our clubs, probably our restaurants. We've been compromised at multiple levels. How do we flesh them out? Marco asked. We don't. We let them think they're winning. Lucien looked at Sophia. Start leaking false information. Make it look credible but wrong. Shipping schedules that don't exist, financial transfers that lead nowhere. Give them just enough truth mixed with lies that they can't tell the difference. And when they act on bad intel? Vincent asked. We'll be waiting. Lucien's expression was stone. They want a war. We'll give them one, but we'll fight it on our terms. He pulled out a stack of photos and spread them across the table. Faces, locations, targets. These are the Calabrese family's key operations. 3 clubs, 2 warehouses, a shipping company, and their headquarters in Queens. He looked around the table. We're going to dismantle them, piece by piece, until they've got nothing left except the choice to surrender or die. That's going to get bloody, Marco said. Yes. Federal attention, police investigations, possible gang war in the streets. I'm aware of the risks. And you're willing to pay them? Lucien's eyes were ice. They tried to kidnap Sienna, burn my warehouse, destroy everything I've built. So yes, I'm willing to burn this entire city to the ground if that's what it takes. The raw intensity in his voice made everyone in the room go quiet. Sophia spoke carefully. Boss, with all due respect, we should consider negotiation. The Calabrese might be willing to... No. The word was final. They crossed lines you don't come back from. This ends one way. Sienna cleared her throat. Can I say something? Lucien looked at her, and his expression softened slightly. Always. What if we expose them instead of destroying them, she said. Give everything we know to the FBI. Financial records, criminal activities, connections. Let the law do what we can't do without starting a war that kills civilians. The law doesn't work against people like us, Marco said. It does if you give them enough evidence to make arrests stick. Sienna pulled out her laptop. I've been compiling information, financial trails, witness statements, documented crimes. Everything we'd need to build a federal case against the Calabrese that would destroy them legally instead of literally. Lucien stared at her. You've been building a RICO case? I've been building an insurance policy, in case this went exactly where it's going. Silence. Then Lucien started laughing, a real laugh, sharp and surprised. You've been working for me for a month and you've already got enough evidence to put our biggest rival in federal prison for life? I'm good at my job. You're terrifying, but his expression was admiration. Show me what you have. Sienna walked them through it. Financial transactions traced through shell corporations. Witness testimony from people the Calabrese had victimized. Security footage from crimes Anthony had helped document while pretending to work for them. It was comprehensive, devastating, legal. If we give this to the FBI, the Calabrese family collapses within days, she finished. No bloodshed, no civilian casualties, no gang war, just quiet arrests and life sentences. Vincent whistled low. That's actually brilliant. It's also risky, Sophia said. The FBI might use this to investigate us too. Let them, Lucien said. We've been cleaning up our operations, going legitimate where it matters. They'll find enough questionable activity to watch us, but not enough to prosecute. He looked at Sienna. You did this. I did my job. You did more than that. He turned to the others. Start preparing the handoff. I want this delivered to the FBI by tomorrow night. Anonymous tip. Untraceable. Perfect. The meeting dissolved into logistics planning. When everyone else left, Lucien seats and Sienna stood alone in the war room, surrounded by evidence of violence they'd chosen not to commit. You saved a lot of lives tonight, Lucien said quietly. I just found a smarter way to win. That's the same thing. He moved closer. You keep surprising me. Is that still good or bad? It's becoming dangerous. For who? Lucien looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For me. Because I'm starting to realize how much I need you, not just for the organization, for... His phone rang. They both jumped like they'd been caught doing something forbidden. Lucien answered, his expression shifting immediately to stone. What? A long pause. When? Another pause. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up and looked at Sienna, and she could see genuine fear behind his controlled facade. Someone just tried to kill my sister. Sienna's blood ran cold. I didn't know you had a sister. Nobody does. I've kept her out of this life, protected, hidden. And somehow the Calabrese found her anyway. Is she, She's alive, but they came close. His hands clenched into fists. This isn't just business anymore. This is personal. They went after family. What do you need me to do? Lucien grabbed his jacket. Stay here. Work with Vincent to finalize the FBI handoff. I need to make sure my sister's secure. Luciana. He turned at the door, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw the mask crack completely. If anything happens to her because of this war, I'm burning the Calabrese family to ash regardless of your evidence. Understood? It wasn't a question. Understood. He left. Sienna stood alone in the war room, staring at maps and photos and evidence, realizing with crystal clarity that she'd fallen into something far deeper and more dangerous than a job. She'd fallen into Lucien Moretti's life, and there was no clean way out. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Another photo. This time it was Lucien's sister, young, maybe early 20s, being escorted by guards into a black SUV. Below the image, tell your boss to back off. Or next time we won't miss. Sienna's hands shook as she forwarded the message to Lucien. His response came 30 seconds later. They just signed their own death warrant, and Sienna knew with absolute certainty that the war she'd tried to prevent was about to explode into something none of them could control. Because Lucien Moretti protected what was his. And somewhere in the last few weeks, without either of them meaning for it to happen, Sienna had become part of that category. The next 72 hours were chaos, wrapped in violence and sealed with fear. The FBI received an anonymous package containing enough evidence to justify immediate raids on Calabrese operations. Arrests happened at dawn. News crews captured everything. But the Calabrese fought back. A Moretti nightclub got firebombed. 3 guards ended up in the hospital. A shipping container full of merchandise disappeared from the port. And through it all, Sienna worked from the safe house, coordinating logistics, tracking retaliation, trying to minimize damage while watching Lucian transform into something darker than she'd ever seen. He barely slept, barely ate, moved through the organization like a storm system, making decisions with brutal efficiency and zero tolerance for failure. His sister was moved to a location so secure even Vincent didn't know where it was, and Lucian stopped pretending there was any distance between him and Sienna. He called her at midnight just to hear her voice, texted her updates constantly, showed up at the safe house at 3 a.m. just to make sure the guards were alert. "You should sleep," she told him during one of those visits. They were standing in the kitchen. Rain hammered the windows. The city glowed beyond the glass like a circuit board of human ambition. "Can't," Lucian said. He leaned against the counter, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "Every time I close my eyes, I see my sister's face when they almost got to her. Or your face when I found out they tried to kidnap you. Or the warehouse burning. Or Anthony's betrayal. It all just—" He stopped, rubbed his face. "It all cycles." Sienna moved closer without thinking. "You can't control everything." "I have to." "Why?" "Because if I don't, people die. People I'm responsible for. People I—" He looked at her, and something vulnerable cracked through. "People I care about." The air between them went electric. "Lucien, I know what you're going to say, that this is complicated, that I'm your boss, that we're in the middle of a war, that getting involved would be reckless and stupid and potentially fatal for both of us. Actually, I was going to say you look like hell and should sit down before you collapse." He laughed, sharp, surprised, genuine. Then he did collapse, sliding down the cabinet to sit on the kitchen floor like a man who'd finally run out of strength to pretend. Sienna sat beside him. They didn't touch, didn't speak, just existed in the same space while the storm raged outside and the war raged beyond the walls. Finally, Lucian said quietly, "I wasn't supposed to care about you." "What?" "When you spilled coffee on me, I thought you were interesting, a distraction, someone who might make the empire run smoother, but I wasn't supposed to—" He stopped. "I have rules about not letting people get close, about keeping everything professional and controlled, and you shattered every single one of them without even trying." Sienna's heart hammered. "Is that a problem?" "Yes." He looked at her. "Because if they figure out how important you are to me, they'll never stop coming after you. The Calabrese, future rivals, anyone who wants leverage. You'll be a target for the rest of your life." "I'm already a target. Not like you would be if people knew—" He stopped again. "Knew what?" Lucien turned to face her fully, and his eyes were raw with something she'd never seen before. Honesty, complete and terrifying honesty. "Knew that I'm in love with you," he said, "and that scares me more than bullets or betrayal or losing the empire. Because I can fight those things, but I don't know how to fight what I feel when you walk into a room." Sienna forgot how to breathe. Before she could respond, Vincent's voice came through Lucien's phone on speaker. "Boss, we've got a situation. The Calabrese just broke one of their guys out of federal custody during transport. We're tracking them now, but—" Lucien was on his feet instantly, the vulnerable man replaced by the ruthless boss. "Where?" "Heading toward Queens. Looks like they're regrouping at their headquarters." "Good." Lucian's voice went cold. "Let them gather. Makes it easier to end this in one move." He hung up and looked at Sienna. "I have to go." "Let me come with you." "Absolutely not." "Lucien, what?" "No." He grabbed her shoulders, and his grip was iron. "This is going to get bloody. I'm about to do things you shouldn't see, things I don't want you to associate with me. So you stay here, stay safe. And when this is over—" "When this is over what?" He pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered, "When this is over, I'm going to figure out how to keep you without getting you killed." Then he was gone, leaving Sienna alone in the safe house, with her heart shattered and rebuilt simultaneously, and absolutely no idea what happened next. Except she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was in love with Lucien Moretti too, and that meant Sienna lasted exactly 20 minutes before breaking every promise she'd just made. She couldn't sit in the safe house knowing Lucien was walking into something that might kill him. Couldn't pretend the confession he'd whispered against her forehead hadn't rewired every circuit in her brain. Couldn't be the person who stayed behind while the man she loved went to war. So she grabbed her coat, slipped past the guards during a shift change, and took a taxi to Queens with her heart hammering and her hands shaking and absolutely zero plan beyond getting there. The Calabrese headquarters was a warehouse in an industrial district that looked like the set of every crime movie ever made. Rusted metal, broken windows, security cameras that probably didn't work. The kind of place where bodies got buried and nobody asked questions. Sienna paid the driver and watched from across the street as black SUVs surrounded the building. Lucien's people, armed, ready. She should have stayed in the taxi, should have turned around, should have done literally anything except what she did next. She crossed the street and walked directly toward Vincent, who spotted her and looked like he'd just witnessed his own death. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Where's Lucien?" "Inside. Negotiating or murdering. Possibly both." Vincent grabbed her arm. "You need to leave. Now. Before—" Gunfire erupted from inside the warehouse, not the controlled pop of single shots, the sustained roar of automatic weapons. Glass exploded. Metal screamed. People shouted. Vincent shoved Sienna behind a car and pulled his weapon. "Stay here. Don't move. If anything happens to me, run." Then he disappeared into the chaos with 6 other guards. Sienna crouched behind the car, pulse hammering in her ears, trying to process what she'd just walked into. More gunfire. A scream. Something that sounded like an explosion. Then silence. The kind of silence that meant either everyone was dead or everyone was waiting for someone else to die. Sienna's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Another one. But this time it wasn't a threat. It was a video. She opened it with trembling hands. The footage showed Lucien inside the warehouse, surrounded by Calabrese soldiers, hands zip-tied behind his back, kneeling on concrete. Blood dripped from a cut above his eyebrow. His suit was torn, but his expression was pure defiance. A man stepped into frame, older, 60s, expensive suit, the kind of face that had ordered 1,000 deaths and slept fine afterward. Carlo Calabrese, the family patriarch. "Mr. Moretti." Carlo's voice was almost pleasant. "I'm disappointed. You walked into my home with violence when I was prepared to offer peace." Lucien spat blood. "Peace from the family that tried to kidnap my people and kill my sister? Interesting definition. Your people started this war when that little assistant of yours began dismantling my operations from the inside." Carlo circled Lucien like a shark. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't connect the dots when shipments went missing and federal investigations suddenly had perfect evidence?" Sienna's blood went cold. "She was doing her job," Lucien said. "She was playing a game she doesn't understand, and now you're going to pay the price for it." Carlo pulled out a gun and pressed it to Lucien's temple. The video ended. Below it, "Come to the east entrance alone or watch him die. You have 10 minutes. Sienna's hands shook so violently she almost dropped the phone. This was a trap. Obviously. Carlo wanted her as leverage. Once she walked through that door, they'd both be dead. But if she didn't go, Lucien died anyway. She looked around for Vincent, for backup, for anyone who could help. The guards were still inside the warehouse. She was alone. 9 minutes left. Sienna stood up, straightened her coat, and walked toward the east entrance like she was walking toward her own execution. Because maybe she was. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped into darkness that smelled like oil and rust and violence. "Smart girl," Carlo's voice echoed from somewhere ahead. "Keep walking, hands where I can see them." Sienna moved through the warehouse, past stacked crates and abandoned machinery, following the sound of breathing and the metallic click of guns being cocked. She found them in a clearing near the center of the space. Lucien still kneeling, blood still dripping, but alive. Carlo standing behind him with the gun still pressed to his skull. 8 Calabrese soldiers forming a circle around them, weapons trained on Lucien. And Vincent's team nowhere in sight. "There she is," Carlo said pleasantly. "The woman who destroyed 6 months of careful planning with spreadsheets and employee surveys. Do you have any idea how much money you cost me?" "Not enough, apparently," Sienna said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Since you're still here," Carlo laughed. "I like her, Lucien. She's got fire. Shame you're both about to die for it." "Let her go," Lucien said, his voice rough. "This is between us. She's not part of... She's the only part that matters." Carlo moved the gun from Lucian's head to point at Sienna. See, I realized something. Killing you doesn't destroy your empire. Someone else just takes over. Your sister, Vincent, one of your captains. The organization survives. But if I kill her? He smiled. If I kill the woman you're in love with, that destroys you, turns you into something broken. And broken men make mistakes, fatal ones. Lucian's expression went dark in a way that made the warehouse feel 10 degrees colder. Touch her and I'll hunt down everyone you've ever cared about. Your children, your grandchildren, your empty threats from a man on his knees. Carlo cocked the gun. Say goodbye, Mr. Moretti. Everything happened at once. Vincent's team burst through the western entrance, guns blazing. Lucian threw himself sideways, hands still bound. Carlo's gun went off, the shot ricocheting off metal. And Sienna dove behind a crate as chaos erupted. Gunfire lit up the warehouse like lightning. Soldiers dropped. Blood sprayed across concrete. Someone screamed. Sienna pressed herself flat against the floor, hands over her head, praying to whoever might be listening that this wasn't how her story ended. Then silence again. Ringing ears, smoke, the copper smell of blood, footsteps approaching. Sienna looked up to see Vincent cutting Lucian's zip ties with a knife. You good, boss? Lucian stood, rubbing his wrists, and his eyes immediately found Sienna. You were supposed to stay at the safe house. I'm not good at following orders. I've noticed. He moved toward her, and she saw the fear behind his anger, the terror of almost losing her mixing with fury that she'd risked herself. Before he could speak, Marco appeared from the shadows dragging someone. Carlo Calabrese. Still alive. Bleeding from a shoulder wound but conscious. Found him trying to escape through the loading dock, Marco said. Lucien's expression went blank. The kind of blank that meant violence was coming and nothing would stop it. He walked to Carlo slowly, each step measured. You put a gun to her head, Lucien said quietly. Business, Carlo gasped. Nothing personal. Everything about this is personal. Lucien crouched down to Carlo's level. You burned my warehouse, threatened my people, came after my sister, and then you pointed a gun at the woman I love and thought you'd walk away breathing. Your organization's finished anyway, Carlo said through bloody teeth. I made sure of it. Lucien went very still. What does that mean? Carlo smiled, and it was the smile of a man who knew he was dead but planned to take everyone with him. You think I'm the only one who wanted you destroyed? I had help. From inside your organization. Someone close enough to know all your secrets and smart enough to use them against you. The words hung in the air like a curse. You're lying, Vincent said. Am I? Ask yourself how I knew about Sienna, how I knew about your sister's location, how I knew exactly when and where to strike. Carlo's bloody smile widened. Someone's been feeding me information for months. Someone you trust. Lucien's jaw clenched. Who? Figure it out yourself or don't. Either way, your empire's already crumbling. I just accelerated the timeline. Lucien stood abruptly and looked at Vincent. Get him out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret. Vincent and Marco dragged Carlo away while Lucien stood in the center of the warehouse, breathing hard, his mind clearly racing. Sienna approached carefully. He could be lying, trying to create paranoia. He's not lying. Lucien's voice was hollow. Too many things didn't add up. The timing, the information they had, the precision of their attacks. He looked at her. Someone inside my organization has been working with the Calabrese, and I need to find out who before they finish what Carlos started. How? By doing something I swore I'd never do. He pulled out his phone. Investigating my own people. They returned to Moretti Tower at dawn. The building looked the same, black glass, steel bones, symbol of power and control. But something had shifted. What used to feel like a fortress now felt like a trap with the enemy already inside. Lucien called an emergency meeting in the war room, only his inner circle. Vincent, Marco, Sophia, Margaret Chen, the heads of each division, and Sienna, who stood in the corner taking notes while watching faces for tells. Carlo Calabrese is in custody, Lucien began without preamble, but before his arrest, he made an interesting claim, that someone in this room has been feeding information to his family, helping them target our operations, sabotaging us from the inside. The silence was suffocating. That's insane, Margaret said. Everyone here has been vetted. Anthony was vetted too, Lucian interrupted, and he burned down a warehouse and sold us out for months before we caught him. So clearly our vetting process has problems. What are you suggesting? Sophia asked carefully. I'm suggesting that until I identify the leak, everyone is a suspect, including the people in this room. Shocked faces, angry denials, the kind of chaos that came from accusing loyal soldiers of treason. Vincent stepped forward. Boss, maybe we should... Should what? Pretend this isn't happening? Hope the traitor confesses out of guilt? Lucien's voice was ice. Someone in my organization tried to get Sienna killed, came after my sister, burned millions in assets, and I'm supposed to just trust that everyone's loyal? So what's your plan? Marco asked. Full audit, financial records, communication logs, security footage, travel records, everything. Vincent will oversee it. Anyone who refuses cooperation gets fired and investigated separately. That's going to cause massive distrust, Margaret warned. Good. Because right now, I don't trust anyone. Lucien's eyes swept the room. Meeting adjourned. Vincent will contact you individually about the audit process. Nobody leaves the city until this is resolved. They filed out one by one, leaving Lucien and Sienna alone in the war room. He sank into a chair and buried his face in his hands. I built this organization on loyalty, he said quietly, and now I'm tearing it apart looking for traitors. Sienna sat beside him. You're protecting what matters. Am I? Or am I destroying it, trying to save it? Before she could answer, Vincent returned with a tablet. Boss, you need to see this. He pulled up financial records, offshore accounts, transactions. I started with the most recent transfers and worked backward. Found a pattern of payments going to a shell corporation we've never used. Small amounts. Consistent. Started about 8 months ago. Who authorized them? Lucien asked. Vincent's expression was grim. The payments came from Margaret Chen's discretionary fund. Sienna's blood ran cold. Margaret, the chief operations manager, the woman who'd given Sienna her first tour, who'd been with Lucien for over a decade. That doesn't make sense, Sienna said. Margaret's been loyal since my father died and I took over, Lucien finished. His voice was hollow. She never agreed with my changes, thought I was weak, too soft, not enough like my father. You think she's working with the Calabrese? I think she's been funding them. He stood abruptly. Vincent, bring her in, now. Don't let her make any calls or access any computers. Just bring her here. Vincent left. Sienna looked at Lucien and saw something breaking behind his eyes. She was my father's most trusted advisor, he said quietly. She taught me how to run this organization, how to negotiate, how to identify threats. And the whole time she was the threat. You don't know that yet. The money could be... It's her. Lucien's certainty was absolute. I can feel it. All the pieces fit. She had access to everything, knew all our vulnerabilities, and she's been undermining me since I started making changes. 10 minutes later, Vincent returned with Margaret. She looked calm. Too calm. Like she'd been expecting this. Lucien faced her across the table, and his expression was carved from stone. 8 months ago, you started making payments to a shell corporation with ties to the Calabrese family. Explain. Margaret didn't flinch. I was protecting this organization. By funding our enemies? By funding the people who would have destroyed you anyway if I hadn't given them just enough to keep them satisfied. Her voice was steady, cold. You've been dismantling everything your father built, going legitimate, treating employees like family instead of assets, acting like we're running a charity instead of a criminal empire. So you decided to betray me? I decided to preserve what matters. The real power. The real empire. Not this sanitized version you're trying to build with your little assistant playing social worker. Sienna felt the insult like a slap, but kept quiet. Lucien's hands clenched into fists. You gave them information that almost got Sienna killed. That almost got my sister killed. That burned down a warehouse and cost us millions. Acceptable losses. Margaret's tone didn't change. In exchange for keeping the Calabrese from launching a full-scale war, they wanted blood. I gave them controlled damage instead. You gave them targets. I gave them distractions. Ways to hurt you that wouldn't destroy the organization. But then you had to escalate. Had to go after them with federal investigations and raids. You turned a manageable problem into a war. Lucian moved so fast Sienna barely saw it. 1 second he was standing behind the table. The next he had Margaret slammed against the wall, forearm across her throat. "You betrayed me," he said, voice deadly quiet. "For months, while pretending loyalty, while sitting in meetings and making decisions, while watching me trust you." Margaret's expression didn't change, even with a forearm cutting off her air. "Your father would have done the same thing in my position. He understood that power requires sacrifice. That sentiment is weakness. Lucian pressed harder. "My father was a monster who died alone because nobody actually loved him. They feared him, obeyed him, but nobody mourned when he was gone. Is that the empire you want? One built on fear and betrayal?" "It's the empire that survives. Not anymore." Lucien released her and stepped back. "Vincent, take her to holding. I'll decide what to do with her later." Margaret straightened her jacket calmly. "You're making a mistake. The organization needs someone who understands how power actually works, not this fantasy version where criminals pretend to have hearts." "Get her out of my sight." Vincent grabbed Margaret and escorted her out. When they were gone, Lucien stood in the empty war room, breathing hard, looking like a man who'd just watched his entire foundation crack. Sienna moved to him slowly. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For being the reason she betrayed you. If I hadn't pushed for changes—" "Stop." He turned to face her. "Margaret betrayed me because she valued the old ways more than loyalty. That's not your fault. That's hers. And mine for not seeing it sooner." "What happens now?" Lucien was quiet for a long moment. "Now I figure out how to rebuild an organization that just lost one of its pillars. How to restore trust when everyone's looking at each other wondering who else might be a traitor. How to move forward when the person I trusted most was working against me the whole time." His voice cracked on the last words. Sienna reached for his hand. "You don't have to figure it out alone. Don't I? Everyone I have trusted has either betrayed me or almost died because of me. My sister, you, the organization, everything I touch turns to—" "Don't finish that sentence." Sienna's voice was firm. "You didn't do this. Margaret did. The Calabrese did. Not you. I let it happen. You're human. Humans make mistakes. Trust the wrong people. Miss red flags. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you someone who chose to believe in loyalty even when it was risky." Lucien looked at her and his expression was raw. "I don't know how to do this. How to be the person who rebuilds instead of the person who destroys." "Then we figure it out together." The words hung between them. Then Lucien pulled her close, buried his face in her shoulder, and let himself break for exactly 30 seconds before pulling himself back together. "Okay," he said quietly. "Together." Dinmut. The next 48 hours were brutal. Margaret's arrest rippled through the organization like a grenade. People who'd worked under her for years suddenly questioned everything. Loyalty wavered, paranoia spread. Lucien implemented emergency protocols, new vetting processes, financial audits, background checks that went back decades. And in the middle of it all, the FBI came knocking. They wanted to talk about the anonymous evidence that had destroyed the Calabrese family. Wanted to know who'd compiled it, who'd delivered it, who'd benefited from it. Sienna sat in an interrogation room across from 2 agents who looked like they'd been born suspicious. "Miss Cross, you've been employed by Moretti Enterprises for approximately 1 month. During that time, the Calabrese family suffered unprecedented law enforcement scrutiny. Care to explain the correlation?" "I was hired to fix employee relations problems," Sienna said calmly, "not investigate rival families." "But you have a background in financial analysis, corporate systems, the kind of skills that could compile a RICO case." "Lots of people have those skills. Not lots of people work for the Morettis." The agent leaned forward. "Here's what we think happened. You were brought in to legitimize operations, make things look clean, but in the process, you discovered evidence of crimes and decided to be a hero. So you compiled everything and handed it to us." Sienna kept her expression neutral. "That's an interesting theory. Is it true? If it were, would I admit it in an interrogation room?" The agents exchanged glances. "Miss Cross, we can protect you. If you're being coerced, If Lucian Moretti is forcing you to participate in criminal activities against your will, we can offer immunity, witness protection, a new life. For a moment, Sienna actually considered it. A new life. Clean, safe, away from warehouses that burned and threats that arrived at midnight, and love that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Then she thought about Lucian, about the organization she'd helped improve, about people whose lives were genuinely better because she'd refused to stay quiet. I don't need protection, she said finally, and I don't need immunity because I haven't done anything wrong. Working for a criminal organization is not illegal if I am not participating in crimes. I manage employee relations, review complaints, improve working conditions. Last time I checked, that's called human resources, not racketeering. The interrogation lasted 3 more hours. They showed her photos, transaction records, organizational charts, everything designed to make her crack and confirm that yes, she'd built the case against the Calabrese. Yes, she was working with law enforcement. Yes, she'd betray Lucian to save herself. But Sienna had learned something working in the Moretti Empire. She was a lot tougher than anyone expected, including herself. When they finally let her go, she walked out of the federal building and found Lucian waiting across the street. He looked exhausted, worried, like he'd aged 5 years in 3 hours. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine. They don't have anything concrete, just theories." "Did they offer you a deal?" Sienna looked at him. Yes. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Fear. Preparation for loss. "What did you tell them?" "I told them I manage employee relations, not federal investigations." Relief crashed across his face so clearly it was almost painful to watch. "You could have taken it," he said quietly. "Could have walked away. Been safe." "I don't want safe." Sienna moved closer. "I want this. Complicated. Dangerous. Morally ambiguous as hell. But real." Lucian pulled her close right there on the street, not caring who saw. "I don't deserve you," he whispered against her hair. "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." They stood like that while the city moved around them, 2 people clinging to each other in the wreckage of an empire that was either being destroyed or reborn. Neither of them was sure which. 1 week after Margaret's arrest, Lucian called Sienna to his office at midnight. She found him at the windows overlooking the city, drink in hand, looking contemplative. "Can't sleep again?" she asked. "Got some interesting news." He turned to face her. "The FBI closed their investigation. Insufficient evidence to prosecute anyone in the organization. The Calabrese case stands on its own merit, but they can't connect it back to us definitively." "That's good news. Margaret's been transferred to witness protection. She gave them information about old crimes in exchange for immunity. Nothing current, nothing that damages us now, but enough to buy her freedom." Sienna felt her jaw clench. "So she betrayed you and walks away free?" "She walks away alive." Lucian's voice was flat. "Which is more than she deserved, but less than she wanted. She thought she'd destroy me. Instead, she destroyed her own life. Lost her position, her reputation, her home. And she has to live knowing she failed. Is that enough?" "It has to be. Because the alternative was killing her. And I'm trying not to be that person anymore." He moved away from the windows and sat on the edge of his desk. "I've been thinking a lot this week about what kind of empire I want to build, what kind of man I want to be, whether it's possible to have both power and conscience." "What did you decide?" "That I don't know, but I want to find out." He looked at her. "With you. If you're willing to stay in this mess." Sienna crossed to him. "I'm not going anywhere. Even though it almost got you killed? Even though my world is complicated and dangerous and morally questionable on the best days? Especially because of that." She smiled. "I've never been good at simple." Lucien pulled her between his knees, hands settling on her waist. "I love you," he said, "and that terrifies me. Because everyone I've ever loved has either died or betrayed me. But somehow you make me think maybe this time it'll be different." "It will be." Sienna touched his face. "Because I'm not going anywhere, not for money, not for safety, not for anything." "Promise?" "Promise." He kissed her then, slow and deep, like a man finally allowing himself something he'd wanted for too long. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild. Make the organization something better. Something that can survive without fear and betrayal holding it together. It won't be easy. There'll be more enemies, more people who think we're weak, more fights. I can handle fights. I know." He smiled. "That's why you're perfect for this." Sienna was about to respond when her phone buzzed. Another unknown number, another message. Her heart dropped. She opened it. It was a photo of the federal building, time-stamped from that afternoon when she'd left the interrogation. Below it, "You chose wrong. Now everyone you love pays the price." And beneath that, a second photo. Lucian's sister, bound, gagged, terror in her eyes. The message was clear. Margaret wasn't the only traitor, and whoever was left had just declared war. Lucian's phone hit the floor. Not dropped. Thrown. Hard enough that the screen spiderwebbed across marble tile while his entire body went rigid with a rage so pure it made the air shimmer. "When?" The word came out like gravel and broken glass. Sienna's hand shook. "The timestamp says 30 minutes ago. Where are her guards?" "I don't know." Lucien was already moving, phone forgotten, pulling open his desk drawer where he kept a gun. Sienna had pretended not to notice during previous visits. He checked the magazine with practiced efficiency, chambered around, and tucked it against his spine beneath the suit jacket. Then he pulled out a second gun and held it toward her. "Do you know how to use this?" "No." "Safety here. Point. Squeeze. Don't pull. Don't hesitate." His eyes were black ice. "If someone comes at you and I'm not there, you shoot them. Center mass. No warning shots. No mercy. Understood?" Sienna took the gun. It was heavier than she expected, cold, real in a way that made her previous life feel like a distant dream. "Understood." Vincent burst through the door without knocking, face grim. Her security detail's been compromised. All 4 guards, dead. Found them in the apartment where we'd relocated her. Throats cut. Professional work. "How long has she been gone?" "At least an hour, maybe 2. Whoever took her knew exactly when to hit and how to disable our people without triggering alarms." Lucien's jaw clenched so tight Sienna heard his teeth grind. "So we've got another mole." "Looks like it." "Who knew her new location?" Vincent's expression turned darker. 7 people. You, me, Marco, Sophia, and 3 guards who are now dead. The implications hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Sophia, or Marco, one of Lucien's most trusted lieutenants, one of the people he'd relied on to rebuild after Margaret's betrayal, someone who'd been sitting in meetings, making decisions, pretending loyalty while selling them out. "Get them both here," Lucien said. "Now, tell them it's urgent. Don't explain why. Just get them in this building within 20 minutes. And if one of them refuses, then we know who did this." Vincent left. Lucien paced the office like a caged predator, every muscle coiled tight, violence radiating off him in waves. "We're going to get her back," Sienna said quietly, "if she's still alive." "She is. They wouldn't kill her yet. She's leverage. They want something from you. They want me to burn myself down trying to save her." His voice cracked slightly on the last words. "They want me desperate enough to make mistakes, and it's working." Sienna moved in front of him, forcing him to stop pacing. "Then we don't make mistakes. We think. We plan. We move smart. There's no time for smart. Every second we waste planning is another second she's terrified and alone with people who want to use her to destroy me. And running in blind gets you both killed." Lucien looked at her, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The ruthless crime lord who'd survived decades through cold calculation fighting against the brother who'd do anything to save his sister. "I can't lose her," he said, voice raw. "She's the only family I have left who isn't corrupted by this life. The only person who remembers who I was before I became this." "You're not going to lose her. You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll help you fight like hell to get her back." His phone buzzed. A new one Vincent had brought while Sienna was looking at the photo. Another message. Same unknown number. Times Square. Midnight. "Come alone or she dies screaming. Bring the girl who thinks she's a hero." Below it, another photo. Lucian's sister with a knife pressed to her throat, blood trickling where the blade had already cut skin, her eyes wide with terror. Lucian made a sound somewhere between a growl and a broken scream. "They want us both," Sienna said, "which means it's a trap designed to kill us and destroy any leverage we have. Or it means whoever's doing this wants an audience, wants to humiliate you publicly before they finish this." Marco arrived first, out of breath, confused. "Boss, Vincent said emergency." He stopped when he saw Lucian's expression. "What happened?" "Someone took my sister. Someone who knew her location. Someone in this room." Lucian's voice was deadly calm. "Where were you an hour ago?" Marco's eyes widened. "You think I—" "Answer the question." "I was at the gym, then home. My wife can verify—" "Your wife would lie for you." "Boss, I've been loyal for 12 years. So was Margaret." The accusation hung between them like a blade. Sophia arrived moments later, sharp-eyed and immediately reading the tension. "What's going on?" "Someone kidnapped Isabella," Lucian said flatly. "Using information only 7 people had. 3 guards are dead. That leaves you 2. Sophia's expression went ice cold. "You're accusing me of treason?" "I'm asking where you were between 10 and 11 tonight." "Working, in my office downstairs. Security footage will confirm it. Security footage can be edited." "So can Jim's sign-in sheets," Sophia shot back, looking at Marco. "If we're throwing accusations around—" Marco's face reddened. "I've never betrayed this family." "Neither have I," Sophia interrupted. "But apparently loyalty means nothing anymore." "Enough!" Lucien's voice cut through the argument. "Vincent, check their alibis. Cross-reference security footage, phone records, credit cards, everything. I want confirmation within 30 minutes. "We don't have 30 minutes, Sienna said quietly. She showed them the message. "They want us in Times Square at midnight. That's 2 hours from now." "It's a trap," Marco said immediately. "Obviously." Lucian grabbed his jacket. "But I'm walking into it anyway because the alternative is letting my sister die." "You'll die too," Sophia said. "Probably, which is why I need both of you to be ready for what comes next. If I don't make it back, Vincent takes over operations. The organization continues. Business as usual. Nobody panics. Nobody tries to seize power. Understood?" Marco and Sophia exchanged glances. "Boss, maybe we should—" "Those are my orders." Lucian looked at Vincent. "You have command. Use it wisely." Then he grabbed Sienna's arm and pulled her toward the elevator. "You're coming with me," he said. It wasn't a question. "I know. This is going to get ugly, possibly fatal, definitely traumatic." "I know that too." The elevator doors closed on Vincent's protests and Sophia's calculating expression and Marco's confusion, just Lucien and Sienna descending toward whatever hell waited in Times Square. "Why do they want me there?" Sienna asked. "Because you represent everything they hate. Change. Conscience. The idea that this organization could be something other than pure violence." His jaw clenched. "They're going to make an example of you. Show everyone what happens when someone tries to soften a criminal empire." "Then let's make sure they fail." Lucien looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Fear mixing with admiration, mixing with the kind of desperate love that made people do catastrophically stupid things. "If we survive this—" "When we survive this," Sienna corrected. "When we survive this," he amended, "I'm going to ask you something." "What?" "Something I've never asked anyone, something terrifying." "You're already terrifying. How much worse can it get?" Despite everything, he almost smiled. The elevator reached the garage. Lucien's car was already running, Vincent's team having prepared it. Black SUV, bulletproof glass. Enough weapons in the trunk to start a small war. They drove through Manhattan in silence, each lost in thoughts about mortality and choices and whether love was worth dying for. The answer, apparently, was yes. Times Square at night was a sensory assault even under normal circumstances. Giant screens, flashing lights, thousands of tourists taking photos and buying merchandise and pretending New York wasn't built on centuries of violence. Tonight it felt like a stage set for execution. Lucian parked 3 blocks away in a garage he apparently owned. They walked the rest of the way, guns hidden, hands intertwined like they were just another couple navigating the chaos. Except couples didn't usually walk toward certain death-holding weapons and praying. Sienna's phone buzzed at 11:58 p.m. Red platform. Center of the square. 2 minutes. The red platform was a tourist attraction. Elevated stairs where people took photos with the billboards as backdrop. Currently empty. Waiting. They climbed the stairs together. At the top stood a figure in a dark coat, face hidden by shadows and a hood pulled low. But Sienna recognized the stance, the way weight shifted from foot to foot, the nervous energy barely contained. "Sophia," Lucien said flatly. The hood came down. Sophia stood there, gun in hand, expression carved from ice and vindication. "Took you long enough to figure it out." "Where's my sister?" "Safe. For now. Depends on how this conversation goes." "This isn't a conversation. This is you holding a gun on your boss after kidnapping his family. That's called suicide." Sophia laughed, sharp and bitter. "You still think you're the boss? You still think this organization respects you after everything you've done? Going soft, legitimizing operations, turning us into a charity with guns." She spat the words like poison. "Your father built an empire. You're turning it into a non-profit." "My father built a prison," Lucien said, "where everyone feared him and nobody loved him, where loyalty came from terror instead of respect. That's not an empire. That's a dictatorship waiting to collapse." "It was stable, powerful, feared. Everything a criminal organization should be. And you've been destroying it piece by piece with your social worker girlfriend feeding you lies about morality and conscience." Sienna felt rage burn through her chest. "I didn't lie about anything. Your organization was rotting from the inside because people like you treated employees like garbage. Because they are garbage, expendable, replaceable. That's how power works. You use people until they break, and then you replace them. But you convinced him," Sophia gestured at Lucien, "that we should treat them like family, like they matter. And now look where we are. Weak, divided, being investigated by the FBI because someone thought they were a hero and compiled evidence against our enemies." "You're angry," Lucien said, "because I chose to evolve instead of stagnate, because I refused to be a carbon copy of my father, because I found someone who made me want to be better than the monster I was raised to become." "You're angry," Sophia corrected, "because you're in love and love makes you weak. It makes you choose her." She pointed the gun at Sienna. "Over the empire, over loyalty, over everything your father taught you." "My father taught me nothing except how to be alone." Lucien's voice was quiet but lethal. "Sienna taught me there might be another way." "There isn't." Sophia's finger tightened on the trigger. "There's only power, and you chose to give yours away. So now I'm taking it back." Everything happened too fast and too slow simultaneously. Sophia's gun swung toward Sienna. Lucien moved, throwing himself in front of her. The shot exploded across Times Square, tourists screaming, people scattering. Lucien staggered backward, hand pressed to his shoulder where blood bloomed across white shirt. Sienna caught him before he fell, her own gun coming up instinctively to point at Sophia. "Where is she?" Sienna's voice was ice. Sophia smiled. "Dead, probably. I handed her to the Calabrese remnants. They wanted revenge. I wanted chaos. We both got what we needed." Lucien tried to stand, blood seeping through his fingers. "You killed an innocent girl to make a point? I killed your weakness, your humanity, the thing that made you unfit to lead." Sophia's gun stayed trained on them. "Now you die. She dies. And I take over an organization that actually remembers how to be ruthless." "You'll never control them," Lucien gasped. "They'll tear you apart. They'll follow strength, which I have, and you lost the moment you fell in love." Sienna's mind raced. They were exposed. Lucien was wounded. Sophia had the high ground and a clear shot. And somewhere in the city, Lucien's sister was in the hands of people who wanted her dead. Options narrowed to one. "Vincent," Sienna said clearly into her phone, which had been on speaker in her pocket since they left the car. "Did you get all that?" Sophia's expression cracked. "What?" "The confession, the kidnapping admission, everything. Did you record it?" "Every word." Vincent's voice came through tinny but clear. "We're 2 minutes out. Hold position." Sophia's gun hand trembled. "You recorded this?" "You confessed to treason, kidnapping, and attempted murder on an open line to your head of security," Sienna said. "Who's loyal to Lucien? Not you. Never you." "Then I'll kill you both before they get here." She fired. Sienna pulled Lucien down, and the bullet sparked off metal railing where his head had been. Return fire came from below. Vincent's team storming the square, weapons drawn, creating a perimeter. Sophia turned to run and found Marco blocking the stairs. "Traitor," she spat. "I was never your ally," Marco said calmly. "I was the test, to see if you'd try to recruit me. And you did. 3 days ago. Tried to convince me Lucien was weak, that we should stage a coup. I told Vincent immediately." Sophia's face went pale with understanding. She'd been set up, allowed to think she had allies, given just enough rope to hang herself. "This was a trap," she whispered. "Yes," Lucien said from the ground, pressing harder against his bleeding shoulder. "Because, after Margaret, I learned to trust very carefully, and you failed every test." Vincent reached them, guns trained on Sophia. "Where's Isabella?" His voice promised violence. Sophia smiled bitterly. "Dead. Like I said. The Calabrese killed her an hour ago and dumped the body in the river. You're too late." Lucien made a sound like something dying. Then Sienna's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered on speaker. "Hello?" A young woman's voice, scared but alive. "Is this Sienna?" "Who is this?" "Isabella Moretti. They took me, but I got away. I'm hiding in a warehouse by the docks. I don't know where exactly. There's a sign that says Chen Shipping. Please help me. They're looking for me, and I don't know how long—" The call cut off. Lucien's head snapped up, blood loss forgotten. "She's alive." "She's bait," Sophia said. "Obviously. The Calabrese are using her to—" "I don't care." Lucien struggled to stand. "Vincent, find that warehouse. Now." "Boss, you're wounded." "I don't care. Find my sister." Marco was already on his phone pulling up shipping company databases, cross-referencing locations. Chen Shipping. "I've got 2 locations, one in Brooklyn, one in Queens." "Split up," Lucien ordered. "Marco, take Brooklyn with half the team. Vincent, Queens with the rest." "I'm going with Vincent." "You need a hospital," Sienna said. "I need my sister." He looked at Vincent. "What do we do with Sophia?" Vincent's smile was all teeth. "Leave her to me." Sophia's face went white. "You can't. I have rights. I'll testify." "You just confessed to kidnapping and attempted murder," Vincent said pleasantly. "I don't think testimony's going to help you. But hey, maybe you'll survive long enough to regret betraying the only person who gave you a chance when everyone else thought you were worthless." He gestured and 2 guards grabbed Sophia, dragging her down the stairs while she screamed threats and promises and pleas that fell on deaf ears. Lucien swayed, blood loss catching up with him. Sienna grabbed his arm. "You can't do this wounded." "Watch me." "Lucien," he turned to her, and his eyes were wild with fear and determination, and love all mixed together. "She's my baby sister. She stayed out of this life because I promised to protect her, and I failed. So now I'm getting her back even if I bleed out doing it. You understand?" Sienna understood. She understood completely. "Then I'm coming with you. You could die. So could you. At least this way we die together." Despite everything, he pulled her close and kissed her hard. Blood and gunpowder and desperation. "If we survive this—" "When we survive this," she corrected again. "When we survive this," he whispered against her mouth, "I'm marrying you." Then they were running toward the car, Vincent shouting orders, team mobilizing, racing against time and blood loss, and enemies who wanted them dead. The warehouse in Queens was exactly what Sienna expected. Abandoned, dark, smelling like rust and chemicals and fear. 3 SUVs pulled up simultaneously, doors opening, armed guards pouring out. Lucien moved like a man possessed, despite the blood soaking his entire left side. Vincent tried to make him wait, but might as well have tried to stop a hurricane. They breached the warehouse in tactical formation, flashlights cutting through darkness, guns raised, every shadow a potential threat. Then they heard it, a muffled sound, someone trying to scream through a gag. They followed it to a back office where Isabella was tied to a chair, duct tape over her mouth, terror in her eyes. Lucien reached her first, nearly collapsing as he cut her free. "You're okay. You're okay. I've got you." Isabella sobbed against his chest, shaking violently. "They were here," she gasped. "5 minutes ago. They heard your cars and ran." How many? 4, maybe 5. I don't know. They kept talking about finishing the job, about making sure you found my body so it would destroy you. Lucien held her tighter. Never. I'm never losing you. Sienna heard it first. The sound of metal on concrete, movement in the shadows. Lucien! The explosion knocked everyone sideways. Not from the office, from outside. One of the SUVs erupting in flames and shrapnel. Gunfire opened up from hidden positions around the warehouse. Muzzle flashes in the dark, bullets tearing through metal and flesh. 2 of Vincent's guards went down immediately. They're still here, Vincent shouted. It's an ambush. Get back to the vehicles. Lucien shielded Isabella with his body. Marco returned fire blindly into the darkness. Sienna grabbed Isabella's other arm and helped pull her toward the exit. More gunfire. A guard screamed. Something ricocheted off the wall inches from Sienna's head. They made it outside into chaos. The remaining SUVs were damaged but functional. Vincent was screaming into his radio for backup. Get them out of here, Lucien shouted, shoving Isabella and Sienna toward a vehicle. Now! What about you? Sienna yelled over the gunfire. I'm finishing this. You're bleeding. I said get them out. His voice left no room for argument. Vincent grabbed both women and practically threw them into the SUV. Marco drove while Vincent and another guard lay down covering fire. Through the back window, Sienna watched Lucien and the remaining team advance on the warehouse, moving toward the hidden attackers, refusing to run. He's going to die, she said. Probably, Vincent said, but he'll take them with him. That's who he is. The SUV peeled away from the warehouse, Isabella sobbing, Sienna's heart shattering, leaving Lucien behind to face whatever came next. And as they drove through Queens with sirens approaching in the distance, Sienna made a decision. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding while the man she loved bled out in a warehouse fighting enemies who'd never stop coming. Turn around, she said. Excuse me? Vincent stared at her. I said turn around. Take Isabella somewhere safe, then go back for Lucien, because I'm not losing him. Not tonight. Not ever. Vincent looked at Marco. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then Marco spun the wheel hard, tires screaming, heading back toward the warehouse and the gunfire, and the man they both knew was worth dying for. Sienna checked her gun, remembered what Lucien had taught her, safety, point, squeeze, and prayed she'd learned enough to save him before it was too late. The warehouse was burning when they returned. Not the entire structure, just sections where gunfire had ignited something flammable. Orange flames licking through broken windows, smoke pouring into the night sky like the city itself was bleeding. Sienna could hear the firefight before she saw it. Sharp cracks of pistols, the heavier boom of shotguns, someone screaming, metal grinding against concrete. Marco parked behind cover 2 blocks away. Vincent was already out, checking his weapon, looking at Sienna with an expression that said, last chance to change your mind. She didn't take it. They moved toward the warehouse in formation, Vincent leading, Marco covering their 6, Sienna in the middle with her heart hammering and her hand surprisingly steady on the gun Lucien had given her. Isabella was safe. Vincent had called in another team to extract her to a location even he didn't know. Protocol for when everything went catastrophically wrong. Which it had. The gunfire stopped as they approached the warehouse entrance. That silence was worse than the noise. It meant either everyone was dead or everyone was waiting. Vincent raised his fist. They stopped. He peered around the corner, then pulled back quickly. 4 hostiles still standing, Calabrese remnants by the look of them, and Lucien's pinned behind some crates near the back. He's still moving, but I don't know how badly he's hit. We need to draw their fire, Marco said. Get them focused on us so he can move. Or we just go in shooting, Sienna heard herself say. Both men looked at her. You've never been in a firefight, Vincent said carefully. No, but I've spent the last month watching this organization tear itself apart from the inside. I've been threatened, almost kidnapped, watched people die, and fallen in love with a man who's bleeding out in there because he tried to protect everyone except himself. Her voice didn't shake. So, yeah, I've never been in a firefight, but I'm walking into one anyway because that's what you do for family. The word hung in the air. Family, not the organization, not the empire. Family. Vincent's expression softened slightly. Stay behind us. You see a clear shot, you take it. Otherwise, you keep your head down and don't be a hero. Being a hero is what got us into this mess, Sienna said. I'm just trying to get us out. They breached through a side entrance, moving fast and low. The warehouse interior was a maze of shipping containers and crates stacked 3 high. Smoke made visibility terrible. Somewhere a fire alarm was screaming. Sienna stayed close to Vincent, her gun raised, finger alongside the trigger like Lucian had taught her. Movement to the left. Vincent fired twice. Someone cursed and returned fire, bullets sparking off metal containers. Marco went right, flanking, his shotgun booming once, and someone stopped cursing permanently. Sienna spotted Lucian behind a stack of crates 30 feet away. He was conscious. Barely. His entire left side was soaked red. He had his gun up, but his hand was shaking. Their eyes met across the chaos. His expression went from relief to fury in half a second. "What are you doing here?" his look said clearly. "Saving your life," hers answered. Then someone stepped out from behind a container directly between them. Young, maybe 25, holding a gun that looked too big for his hands, Calabrese family tattoo on his neck. Eyes wild with the kind of desperation that came from knowing you were already dead and just trying to take someone with you. He saw Sienna, raise the gun. She raised hers faster. Safety. Point. Squeeze. The gun kicked in her hands. Once. Twice. 3 times because fear made her pull the trigger more than she needed to. The man went down hard. Sienna stood frozen, staring at the body, trying to process that she'd just killed someone. "Move!" Vincent grabbed her arm and pulled her behind cover as more gunfire erupted. 2 more hostiles, one behind a container to the right, one elevated on a catwalk above them. The one above had a clear shot at Lucian. Sienna saw it happening in slow motion, the barrel tracking. Lucian too injured to move fast enough. She didn't think, just aimed and fired. The shot went high, hit the catwalk railing instead of the shooter, but the man flinched, ducked, lost his angle. Long enough for Lucian to roll behind better cover. Long enough for Marco to circle and put 2 rounds through the container where the last ground-level hostile was hiding. The man stumbled out, hands up, weapon dropped. "Don't shoot. I'm done. I surrender." Vincent moved forward cautiously. "Who sent you?" "Sophia paid us. Said there'd be money and revenge. Didn't say we'd be fighting an entire army." "You're not fighting an army," Vincent said coldly. "You're fighting a family, and you just learned the difference." He zip-tied the man's hands while Marco covered the catwalk. The shooter above wasn't giving up. He fired wildly, panic making him sloppy. Lucian leaned out from cover and put a single round through the man's chest. He fell from the catwalk and didn't move again. Then silence. Real silence. The kind that meant either it was over or they were about to die. Sienna ran to Lucian before anyone could stop her. He was slumped against the crates, breathing shallow, eyes glassy with blood loss. "You're an idiot," he said weakly. "You're welcome." She pressed her hands against his shoulder wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me. Ambulance is coming." "I told you to stay safe." "I don't follow orders well. You should have figured that out by now." Despite everything, he smiled, blood on his teeth, but a real smile. "I love you," he whispered. "I know. You told me right before running into a warehouse to get yourself killed. Had to save my sister. And I had to save you. We're even." His hand found hers, slick with his own blood, squeezing weakly. "If I don't make it, you're making it. I didn't just kill someone for the first time so you could die on me." That got his attention. "You killed one of them, maybe 2. I'm not sure if the catwalk shot counted." Her voice cracked. "And I'm going to have nightmares about it for years, but right now I don't care because you're alive and Isabella's alive and we won." "We won," he repeated, tasting the words. "Doesn't feel like winning." "Winning never does when it costs this much." Sirens approached, lots of them, police, ambulances, fire trucks. The whole machinery of emergency response descending on a crime scene that was going to require months of investigation. Vincent appeared beside them. "Boss, we need to get our stories straight before—" "Tell them the truth," Lucian said. "Sophia betrayed us, hired remnants of the Calabrese family to kidnap my sister and kill us. We defended ourselves. It's all legal. Mostly. The bodies? Self-defense. Witnesses can confirm." He looked at the surrendered hostile. "Including him, right?" The man nodded frantically. Whatever you want, just don't kill me. The? Lucian's eyes were closing. All legal. Lucien. Sienna shook him. Stay awake, the ambulance is here. So tired. I know. But you can sleep after they patch you up. Not before. Bossy. You love it. I do. His eyes opened slightly. Ask me again. Ask you what? If we survive this. What I was going to ask you. You're delirious from blood loss. Ask me. Sienna leaned close, her forehead against his. What were you going to ask me? Marry me. His voice was barely a whisper. I know it's insane. We've known each other 5 weeks. I'm a criminal. You're too good for this life. But marry me anyway, because I don't want to survive this without you. Tears blurred Sienna's vision. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Is it working? Yes, you idiot, yes. He smiled again. Good, because I already bought a ring. It's in my desk, top drawer. Been there for a week. Then his eyes closed and he went limp. Sienna screamed for the paramedics. They descended like a swarm, professional and efficient, loading Lucien onto a stretcher, starting IVs, checking vitals, asking questions she barely heard through the ringing in her ears. He proposed, she said numbly as they wheeled him toward the ambulance. He asked me to marry him and then he passed out. Very romantic, Vincent said. For a crime lord. Is he going to... He's survived worse. He'll survive this. Vincent's voice was certain. The boss is too stubborn to die before the wedding. Sienna rode in the ambulance, holding Lucien's hand, watching monitors she didn't understand flash numbers that hopefully meant he'd live. The paramedic kept talking. Blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen levels. Words that blurred together into a prayer that sounded like, please don't leave me. Not now, not after everything. At the hospital, they tried to separate them. Sienna refused to let go of his hand until a doctor physically pried her fingers loose. He needs surgery. You can't come. But we'll do everything we can. Then they wheeled him through doors she couldn't follow, and Sienna stood in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and fear, covered in blood that wasn't hers, processing the fact that she'd killed someone tonight, maybe 2 someones, to save the man she loved, and she'd do it again without hesitation if it meant he survived. Vincent found her 20 minutes later. Isabella's secure. The hostel we captured is talking, confirming everything. Sophia orchestrated the whole thing, hired the Calabrese remnants, planned the ambush, wanted to destroy Lucien and take over the organization. Where is she now? Vincent's expression went dark. Being questioned by people who don't appreciate traitors. Translation. Sophia was having a very bad night. Sienna should have felt satisfaction, vindication, something. Instead, she just felt tired. How many died tonight? She asked. 3 of ours. 5 of theirs. Could have been worse. Could have been better. That's not how war works. I don't want this to be war anymore, Sienna said quietly. I want it to be over. It is. Sophia was the last one, the last mole, the last betrayal. Now we rebuild. Into what? Vincent sat beside her in an uncomfortable plastic chair designed to make waiting unbearable. Into whatever the boss decides. But if I know him, he's going to finish what you started. Clean operations, fair treatment, an organization people are proud to work for instead of afraid of. He looked at her. You changed him, made him think there was another way. Tonight proved you were right. Tonight proved people still die when you try to change things. People die either way. At least your way, they die for something that matters. Hours passed. Dawn crept through the waiting room windows. Coffee appeared from somewhere. Vincent made calls. Marco arrived with updates. Isabella showed up with 2 guards and threw herself into Sienna's arms, sobbing thank yous and apologies. You came back for him, Isabella said. Everyone said you ran, but you came back. I love him, Sienna said simply. What else was I going to do? Most people would have stayed safe. I'm not most people, apparently. Finally, a surgeon emerged. Tired, blood-stained scrubs. The expression of someone who'd fought for a life and won. He's stable, lost a lot of blood. The bullet did damage but missed major arteries. He'll need physical therapy, months of recovery. But he'll live. Sienna's legs went weak. Vincent caught her before she collapsed. Can I see him? He's in recovery, still sedated, but yes, room 304. She practically ran. Lucien looked small in the hospital bed. Pale. Bandaged. Machines beeping around him like a mechanical chorus keeping him tethered to life. But alive. Breathing. Sienna pulled a chair close and took his hand. You proposed and then immediately almost died, she said quietly. That's very on brand for you. Dramatic. Poorly timed. Absolutely insane. His fingers twitched slightly in hers. I said yes, by the way, in case you don't remember. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay in this life. Yes, I'll help you build something better than what came before. Because apparently I'm just as crazy as you are. The machines beeped steadily. His chest rose and fell. He didn't wake up, but she felt his hand squeeze hers. Just barely. Enough. Sienna stayed there for hours, watching him sleep, processing everything that had happened, everything that had changed, everyone she'd become in 5 weeks. She'd walked into Moretti Tower with coffee and desperation. She was walking out with blood on her hands and a ring waiting in a desk drawer in a future she couldn't have imagined. Not clean, not simple, not safe, but hers. 3 days later, Lucien woke up properly. Sienna was asleep in the chair beside his bed, head on the mattress, hand still holding his. Hey, he said, voice rough from intubation. She jerked awake. You're awake. Apparently, he looked around the hospital room. Isabella? Safe. She's been here every day. Vincent sent her to get food 20 minutes ago. Sophia? Arrested. Federal charges. She's not getting out. The organization? Intact. Vincent's been running things. Everyone's holding steady, waiting for you. Lucien absorbed this. And you? I killed 2 people. Maybe 3 depending on how you count the catwalk shot. I'm processing that with varying degrees of success. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'd do it again. She squeezed his hand. You asked me to marry you and then immediately almost bled out. Do you remember? His eyes widened. I did? You did? What did you say? I said yes. Obviously. Because I'm apparently as insane as you are. Relief crashed across his face. The ring is in your desk, top drawer. I checked. It's beautiful and probably cost more than my entire life before I met you, and I love it. You haven't even seen it. Doesn't matter. You picked it. That's enough. Lucien tried to sit up and winced. Don't, Sienna said. The doctor said you need to rest for at least a week before you try to be a crime lord again. A week? Minimum, possibly longer. Vincent's handling everything. The organization's fine. You need to heal. That's what you need to do. Let someone else carry the weight for once. He looked at her, and something vulnerable cracked through. I don't know how. Then learn. We've both got things to learn. You need to learn to trust people. I need to learn to live with the fact that I killed someone and will probably have to do it again if we're staying in this life. We don't have to stay, Lucien said quietly. We could leave. Take the money. Disappear. Build something normal somewhere else. Sienna thought about it. Really thought about it. A normal life, safe, clean, far from warehouses and gunfire and betrayal. No, she said finally. No. We started something here. Changes, improvements. An organization that might actually become something worth running instead of just surviving. If we leave, people like Sophia win. The old guard takes over. Everything we fought for disappears. She met his eyes. So no, we stay. We finish this. We build the empire you should have inherited instead of the one you got. Lucien stared at her. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. It's going to be hard. Dangerous. There'll be more Sophias, more betrayals, more nights like this. I know. And you still want it? I want you. The empire comes with you. So yeah, I want it. He pulled her close despite the pain it caused, kissed her hard, tasted like hospital and survival and promises neither of them could guarantee but were making anyway. When they broke apart, Isabella was standing in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. You're awake, she said. Come here, Lucien said. She ran to him, careful of his injuries, hugging him like he might disappear. I'm so sorry. If I hadn't been taken... Stop. None of this is your fault. Sophia did this. The Calabrese did this, not you. But if I'd been more careful, you were targeted by professionals. There was nothing you could have done differently. He looked at Sienna. We all survived. That's what matters. What happens now? Isabella asked. Now we rebuild. Make the organization something better, something you could be proud of instead of ashamed of. I've never been ashamed of you. You should have been. I've done terrible things, but I'm trying to be better, trying to build something that doesn't require people to choose between morality and survival. Can you actually do that? In this world? I don't know, Lucien admitted. But I'm going to try, because the woman I love convinced me it's possible. Isabella looked at Sienna. You're really staying, even after everything? I'm really staying. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the craziest. Probably both, Sienna said. But I've learned crazy and brave are pretty similar sometimes. 2 months later, the organization looked different. Not the buildings. Those were still black glass and steel and intimidation. But the energy inside them had shifted. Employees smiled, actually smiled, like they worked somewhere they wanted to be instead of somewhere they feared leaving. Wages went up across every division. Benefits packages expanded. Safety protocols got implemented. Managers who'd been coasting on fear and exploitation got replaced with people who understood that productivity came from respect, not terror. The criminal side of operations got quieter, more strategic, less visible. Lucien shifted focus toward legitimate businesses that could sustain the organization without requiring constant violence. It wasn't perfect. There were still threats, rival families testing boundaries, federal investigators watching carefully, people inside the organization who thought going legitimate was surrender. But it was better. And better was something. Lucien's shoulder healed slowly. Physical therapy was brutal. The scar tissue limited his range of motion. Some days he could barely lift his arm above shoulder height. That's what you get for being a hero, Sienna told him during one particularly frustrating session. I wasn't being a hero. I was being desperate. Same thing usually. They were in his office, evening light through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below like a circuit board of human ambition. Lucien pulled a small box from his desk drawer. I've been waiting for the right moment, but I'm starting to think there's no such thing. So here. He opened it. The ring was platinum. Simple band. Single stone that caught the light and shattered it into colors Sienna didn't have names for. It's perfect, she said. You haven't let me actually propose yet. You proposed in a warehouse while bleeding out. I think we're past formality. Humor me. Lucien stood carefully, his shoulders still giving him trouble, and lowered himself to one knee with visible effort. Sienna Cross. You walked into my life carrying coffee and chaos. You dismantled my organization's worst habits. You killed people to save me. You refused to run when any sane person would have. You're stubborn, reckless, brilliant, and the only person I've ever met who made me want to be something other than the monster I was raised to become. He took her hand. Will you marry me? For real this time. With witnesses and planning and a ceremony that doesn't involve gunfire? Sienna laughed through tears. Yes. Obviously yes. He slipped the ring on her finger. Perfect fit, like it had been waiting for her. I love you, he said. I love you too, even though you're dramatic and controlling and occasionally make terrible decisions. Only occasionally? I'm being generous. He stood, kissed her, and for a moment everything else disappeared. The empire, the threats, the scars. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something better. Vincent knocked and entered without waiting. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation. Lucien sighed. What kind of situation? The good kind. 3 rival families just reached out through back channels. They want to meet, discuss territories and boundaries, and possibly an alliance. An alliance? Word's gotten around about how we handled Sophia, how we survived the Calabrese, how the organization's getting stronger instead of weaker despite going more legitimate. They want to talk about doing the same thing, modernizing, evolving, making this life sustainable instead of a death sentence. Lucien looked at Sienna. They want to follow our lead. Your lead, she corrected. I just pointed out the problems. You fix them. We fix them, he said firmly. Together. So do we take the meeting? Vincent asked. Lucian thought for a moment. Yes, but carefully. And Sienna comes with me. Boss, that's non-negotiable. She's not just my fiancée. She's my partner in everything. If these families want an alliance, they need to understand that. Vincent nodded slowly. The old guard's not going to like this. The old guard can adapt or leave. Those are their options. After Vincent left, Sienna stood at the windows looking out at the city. This is really happening, she said. We're actually changing things. Slowly, imperfectly. But yes, your father would have hated it. My father hated everything that didn't involve violence and fear. I'm not building his empire anymore. I'm building ours. Sienna turned to face him. Ours. Yours and mine. An organization that can survive without requiring people to sacrifice their humanity. That's the goal anyway. And if we fail, then we fail trying to be better instead of succeeding at being monsters. I can live with that. Can you? Really? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. 5 weeks ago, I would have said no. Would have told you power requires sacrifice, that morality is luxury, that the only thing that matters is survival. He moved to her, hands settling on her waist. But then you walked into my life and everything changed. You made me want things I'd convinced myself were impossible. Family, trust, love. A future that isn't just about surviving until someone finally succeeds in killing me. So what do we do now? Now we get married, build the empire, face whatever comes next, together. That simple? Nothing about this is simple, but the important parts are you, me, the choice to be better than what we were. Sienna leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body, the certainty of something real in a world that specialized in illusions. I'm scared, she admitted. Good. Fear means you're paying attention. What if we can't do this? What if the empire tears us apart, or we fail, or someone else like Sophia comes along? Then we deal with it, the same way we've dealt with everything else, fighting like hell and refusing to give up. He tilted her face up to meet his eyes. I can't promise it'll be easy. Can't promise we'll succeed. But I can promise I'll fight for this. For us. Every single day. That's all I need, Sienna said. And she meant it. Ahmad. 6 months after the warehouse, Sienna and Lucien stood in a courthouse in Manhattan getting married. Not a big wedding, just Vincent, Marco, Isabella, and a handful of people from the organization who'd proven their loyalty through fire. The ceremony was simple, quick, legal without being sentimental. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Lucien pulled Sienna close and kissed her like they had all the time in the world, instead of a car waiting outside to take them to a meeting with 3 rival families. I love you, he whispered against her mouth. I love you too. Now let's go make history. They walked out of the courthouse hand in hand, Sienna in a simple white dress, Lucien in a black suit, both of them armed because romance and reality weren't mutually exclusive in their world. The car was waiting, Vincent driving, Marco in the passenger seat, 2 SUVs full of guards behind them. Ready? Vincent asked. Lucien looked at Sienna. Ready? She thought about the girl who'd walked into Moretti Tower 5 months ago, desperate, broke, scared, looking for a job that would pay rent. She'd found something completely different. Purpose. Family. Love. A role in an empire that was slowly becoming something worth leading instead of just surviving. Ready, she said. They drove through Manhattan toward a meeting that might reshape the entire criminal landscape of New York, toward enemies who wanted to become allies, toward a future nobody could predict but everyone could build. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Sienna realized something important. She wasn't the hero of this story. Neither was Lucien. They were just 2 people who'd found each other in chaos and decided that surviving wasn't enough anymore. They wanted to thrive, to build, to change things. The warehouse fires would eventually be forgotten, the bodies buried, the betrayals processed and healed from. But the choice they'd made, to be better, to demand better, to create an empire where people mattered more than profit, that would last. Maybe not forever, maybe not perfectly, but long enough to matter. The car pulled up to a restaurant in Midtown. Neutral territory. Expensive enough to signal respect. Public enough to discourage violence. 3 rival bosses waited inside. Men who'd built their own empires on fear and blood and tradition. Men who were ready to evolve or die trying. Lucien squeezed Sienna's hand. Last chance to run. I'm not running. Not from you. Not from this. Not from anything. Even when it gets ugly? Especially when it gets ugly. That's when you need me most. He smiled. Real. Genuine. The smile of a man who'd found something worth protecting more than power. Let's go change the world, he said. Let's, Sienna agreed, and they walked into the restaurant together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next, because the storm over Manhattan had passed. But the empire they were building was just beginning, and for the first time in generations, it was being built on something other than fear. It was being built on choice, on trust, on the radical idea that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. The Moretti Empire didn't end that night. It evolved into something dangerous and imperfect and morally complicated, but genuinely trying to be better than what came before. And at its heart were 2 people who'd started as boss and assistant and become something far more powerful. Partners, equals, the king and queen of an empire learning to rule with conscience instead of just conquest. It wasn't the ending anyone expected, but it was the one they'd fought for. And in a world built on violence and betrayal, that was its own kind of victory. Bus. 2 years later, the headquarters of Moretti Enterprises looked the same from the outside. Black glass, steel bones, symbol of power. But inside, everything had changed. Employees laughed in hallways. The lobby had comfortable seating instead of intimidation architecture. Security was still tight, but felt protective instead of threatening. Sienna walked through the building with a tablet full of quarterly reports showing profits up, employee satisfaction higher than ever, and federal investigators finally backing off because the legitimate businesses were actually legitimate now. She found Lucien in his office, standing at the windows like he always did when he was thinking. The alliance is holding, she said. 3 families working together, territories respected, violence down across the board. We're actually doing it. We're trying, he corrected. There's still problems, still threats, still people who think cooperation is weakness, but fewer than before. True. Sienna moved beside him, and he wrapped an arm around her waist automatically. Isabella's graduating next month, she said. Top of her class. She wants to join the organization, work in the legitimate businesses, help expand operations. She shouldn't, Lucien said quietly. This life is different now. You made it different. She sees that, wants to be part of it. It's still dangerous. Life is dangerous. At least this way she gets to choose her danger instead of having it forced on her. Lucien was quiet for a moment. You sound like me. I learned from the best. He turned to face her fully. Do you regret it? Any of it? Sienna thought about the question honestly. 5 weeks that had turned into months, that had turned into years. The violence, the fear, the moral compromises, the things she'd done that would have horrified the person she used to be. No, she said finally. I don't regret it, because I found you, found purpose, found out I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. That's worth everything it cost. Even the nightmares? She still had them. Probably always would. The warehouse, the gunfire, the weight of the gun in her hands. The moment she'd become someone who could kill. Even those. Because they remind me what we're fighting for. Why the changes matter. Why we can't go back to how things were. Lucien kissed her forehead. I love you. I know. You tell me every day. Not enough. I should tell you every hour. That would get annoying. Probably. They stood together watching the city below, 2 people who'd survived impossible odds and built something neither of them could have imagined when coffee exploded across an expensive suit and changed everything. What do we do now? Sienna asked. Now we keep building, keep improving, keep fighting to be better than what we were. Lucien pulled her closer. And we live. Actually live. Not just survive. Together? Always together. And in a city that specialized in violence and ambition and people consuming each other in pursuit of power, 2 people who'd started as strangers became something rare. A partnership built on trust instead of fear, love instead of leverage, the choice to evolve instead of the certainty of destruction. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. And in their world, real was more valuable than perfect could ever be. The storm over Manhattan had ended years ago, but the empire it had forged was just beginning to show what it could become when built on something other than blood and betrayal, something almost like hope, and that was enough.